can see the background on mine, bro, but I got the Mill t-shirt up. One of the original ones.
Mate, I need to put my glasses on.
Bro, that's
actually who's talking based on the colour.
Actually, we saw you when you were sitting down originally, and then you put your glasses on, and I was like, this guy is looking all distinguished and everything.
Mate, distinguished. Okay,
distinguished.
I'll take that.
You look like a scholar, bro. A scholar. I said, oh.
I've never been accused of being a scholar. That's cool.
So it's on my right shoulder. You'll probably see it once it's fully edited and stuff when it's in landscape view. But I've got one of the original T-shirts up with the "You Work, You Reap" with the logo in the background on it. So that's sitting there.
Your shoulders are actually taking up most of the screen.
That's because, have you got the little thing in the top right-hand corner? Have you got the little? If you hover your mouse, can you click and make it has it got the little expand thing there for you?
Let me just have a look here. Expand. Yes, the arrow.
Yeah. So can you see it now?
I can't. It's just out of shot. Just out of shot.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Well, it's not out of shot on mine, which
I've just got the edge of your right shoulder.
Okay. All right. See. But yeah, so that's cool. Anyway, I can edit out some of that stuff. Maybe I might leave that part in there where you mentioned you've never been accused of being a scholar.
What a good start to the podcast.
I'll leave that in there as the segue. No. But anyway, we'll get into it. 3, 2, 1. Kia ora koutou. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this epic Aotearoa Create a Better Future podcast, and in particular, this special series in the service of others, Who Dares Wins. And it is Brian and it is our great privilege to have our very first former Australian Special Air Service operator, Nick Caldwell. I'm going to let him introduce himself shortly, but this gentleman, for those of you that may have been listening to previous podcasts, this guy is somebody that holds a special place in my heart and in my mind. He's always been and has been and continues to be one of my closest friends. We had a falling out some years back in relation to something where I was more prideful and egotistical in terms of where I was at and didn't really understand the things that we're going through at that time. But we've been able to sort of mend a few bridges and things along the way, and I'm so grateful to have Nick as our very first Australian Special Air Service operator on this podcast. We're going to delve into his insights. He's a wonderful man, a good man, a husband and father, a business owner, entrepreneur in many aspects in that as well, so we're looking forward to diving into that. But more important than that, he's just a genuine good bloke. And so we're looking forward to spending some time with you, Nick. Thank you very much for your time, brother. Great to see you.
Oh, mate. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me. It's really good to be talking to you too.
Yeah, awesome. Mate, we're going to dive straight in terms of, because we're going to put a whole bunch of links to where people can find you and connect with you at the Mill Gym and those sorts of things. But really interested to give our audience, so we've had a bunch of people that are either current or former police, current or former Defence Force, and or civilians that have contacted us, been really pleased with the content, or been really positive anyway about the messages that they've heard, the experiences that people like yourself have been able to share. And a lot of their comments and questions have revolved around, selection and cycle, and it hasn't been sort of, I guess, the typical questions that we might usually get from civilians that are probably not the sort of things that we're tapping into in this sort of podcast. But so we're going to start there, and I guess where I would like to lead, and Brian's going to jump in as we go. What I'd love to do, Nick, if it's all right with you, would you be able to just share with us, take as much time as you like or as little time as you like, because we've got a whole bunch of other questions. What was selection like for you? Can you paint a picture for what it was like for you?
I look back on selection as, and I see it as one of those pivotal times in my life, obviously. You understand how this is. You spend a lot of time thinking about becoming an operator. You spend a lot of time dreaming about what it would be like, doing the actual job, living the stories that you've read about, that you've studied, that you've looked at, the movies you've watched, all those sorts of things as a kid. So being at the start line for selection for me, especially being with you and the other guys who are amongst my best mates ever, and doing that with my patrol was one of the best, was definitely, it was a pivotal time in my life. And I looked at selection as effectively a stepping stone to get to where I wanted to go. Yes, it was going to be hard. Yes, but we were all well and truly au fait with what selection was going to entail. because you've been through a process as well as most of the guys that were in our patrol. They're all commandos. So we'd all done selection of a sort, commando selection, to get to where we were. So we had a real world understanding of what selection would entail. So we're by no means ignorant to what was ahead, but at the same time, I was so excited. I just didn't want to be anywhere else on the planet, and that was day one, obviously. but it really didn't change. The next 21 days really didn't change. Effectively, I loved it. I hated it, but I loved it. And there was no point there where I thought maybe this is the wrong decision. Maybe I won't be able to make it, because I'd so much invested in my future in that unit that there was no other option for me. And I think the same for anyone else, yourself included, who did that whatever you needed to get you through, whatever got you to the start line in the first place. I mean, it's a big undertaking to actually get there in the first place, and then let alone finish. You just had to find what it was that kept the dream alive. And for me, it was just that literally I'm going to be living the dream, my boyhood dream.
Awesome, man. That's great. You've summarized that really well, and that's going to lead into a few things, like other questions that I didn't even have written down just based on your answer. So you talked about books and study and things that you were looking at into. Did you do a lot of reading in relation to SAS books? Probably, I think at that time when we were going through, there was probably more around 22 guys that had books out at that time. Is that the sort of stuff that you were looking at?
Yeah. I mean, everything from Rhodesia, the Rhodesian SAS, all the way through to 22.
Gotcha.
Even going, looking at guys like Chris Ryan and Andy McNabb. Well, that was their nom de jure, but their stories, whether they be fictional or non-fiction, I just ate it up. You look at my bookshelf, I've still got tons of books of that whole era of X-22 guys post first Iraq War or Desert Storm, and the stories, I just ate it all up. And then obviously fuel to the fire was the Iranian, and we see all the information about that was coming out. There was still bits and pieces coming out. There wasn't a lot, but there was enough to keep the fire stoked. There was enough to keep me interested in saying this is absolutely what I wanted to do.
Awesome. Can I ask Nick? So you talk about like the Iranian stuff and the 22 SAS and all the stuff that the English were doing, but could you see that link with Australia and the regiment in Australia, and was that your fuel to go? I want to be or do you want to go like 22?
I don't know. I'm too patriotic. Even though the British are very much similar to us, I'm still too patriotic. I think I didn't know how it worked. How it worked in the Tier 1 community, and how you basically gained your street cred or earned your place to go front line, even if you did wear the cap, you did wear the badge. So I was ignorant to that. All I wanted to do was just go and do what I'd read about, and whether it was as the British Army, the Australian Army. Obviously, there's guys that we know in our cohort that had a crack at the US and the UK branches. And for us, and for me, it was like, we've got it pretty good here. Like, we still get, conditions for us, pay-wise, everything else is pretty good. We probably got the worst base in the world. When you looked at Campbell Barracks back then, my old man came for our Barrow parade, and he goes, where's your office? I said, there's holes in the roof, and there's gutters are falling apart, and there's potholes in the road. And he goes, this is the SAS camp. I said, yeah, Dad, this is the SAS camp. We weren't too fussed about
That's
that.
cool,
now,
eh?
Now it's changed. In fact, the group, you Kiwi guys that heard stories about how good it was compared to how we had, I'm going, how does that work? Never works. But now we're caught up to you guys. So you look at the base now, it's world class. It is literally high tech, high speed, probably what you envisage a Tier 1 unit should be housed in. It fits the bill absolutely.
Man, awesome, bro. Thanks for that and that clarification and stuff as well. I love the points, and I want to ask you this question: what were some of the most memorable parts of selection for you? What stuck out for you, whether it was good or bad? Because it is that love-hate relationship. What was some of the memorable stuff, maybe positive or even maybe not so positive? Is there anything that stands out for you in your mind during that process?
Actually, one thing comes to mind straight away. I didn't have to think about it; it just comes straight up. You get allocated responsibilities for this section throughout, especially through Lucky Dip. So we're in Lucky Dip. You're in my section, and I got an allocated section commander's position. So obviously, you've got to navigate from point A to point B We've got to get there in a certain amount of time. I was trying to work out in my head how much time was about right. And I think I had it worked out. So by the time I had the position for section command, I said, okay, we've probably got this amount of time to cover this amount of distance. I want the best guy out, and we're just going to hang on. Because I knew as soon as I put you in front, Joe was out front, we had to basically run to keep up with him. I was trying to make it look to the instructors that it was all under control. Like I had this, like, I knew we were going this fast, no worries, like no pressure at all. So literally they're looking at me going, looking at their watches, looking at me going, we're way ahead of time here. So I basically pulled the brakes on it, made it stop, and we actually sat down and had a nice cup of coffee, nice cup of tea, sat down in the sun, enjoyed the shade, all that sort of stuff. And the instructors go, so you guys going to get going? So, I think I've got another half hour. Because we were so far ahead, because Joe just went, I know where we're going, and took off. I was like, okay, everyone hang on, because we got to keep up. That was the point where, and I think by that stage, we all of us were pretty comfortable with well, I can speak for myself. Like we got to a certain point, it was easily in the second or the last third of the course where you actually grow into the space. You actually realise that I get the game plan here. I get the rules of this game. And by that stage, we're all pretty comfortable there. You actually get more and more confident, even though you're getting physically, weaker, because that's the process. You're actually getting more confidence because I get the game. I get that there's timings here. I get that there's patterns set here. All you need to do is leverage those patterns and read the rules of the game, and we'll be okay. So, I mean, that was one of those points where I said, okay, I want the best team navigating. Not necessarily the fastest team, but it turned out to be the fastest team. But we definitely got to our checkpoint in well ahead of time. So, yeah, I remember most. And you did remind me in an email about the water crossing.
Yeah.
I thought nothing of that. It was just like, it wasn't. It was we were all getting across together. That's the whole mindset. That I only remember that because you said it, but it wasn't one of those things that stood out in my head in terms of, because there's so many points there where I felt I was struggling, and then you would pick something up heavier, and then I'd go, okay, maybe I can still go here, still keep going, and we fed off each other. It's just the way selection, not only selection, but the Rio cycle. That's how it all worked.
Yeah, that's beautiful, man. I love the way you shared that, and particularly, you made me laugh. I was just thinking that's probably one of the few times that I may have known where I was going.
Well,
or pretending.
You did it really well. So you ended up in the right spot, so it was good.
So Nick, did he go, oh, follow me, boys, and then you went just ran after him? Is it?
No, I just went, okay, Joe, you ready? Goes, turn around. Okay, I guess we're going, guys. Let's go.
I love that part. When I spoke with you, I remember that river crossing really well, because when we were getting our gear up, having the pack, and then wrapping it up in the hoochie, tying the ends, putting it together, and then creating that flotation for us to get across. My one, and I don't know if it was the Australian hoochie that they gave me or what, but
they're terrible.
But it filled with water, and it was starting to sink. Yeah, it was starting to sink. So maybe it was a set, but what I really remembered about that was you were right there beside me. And I love the way you spoke about that. We fed off each other. We were there for each other. We were crossing that river together. And mine was going down, but you stayed with me and helped me get across that. And because you got the DS in the boat, right? They're like, you want to get in the boat? You had enough, haven't you? You ready to quit?
You're trying to get your finger, but your dog
And I'm thinking all sorts of stuff in my head, which I can't verbalize to them because they probably just push my head down under the water. But it was it was so great having you beside me. And one of the things that I remember, this was during Lucky Dip, Brian. So when we were on there, Nick and I were in the same group for the pretty much the majority of selection. I got some other questions for you as well, Nick. But there was a part there where we were sitting around this campfire, and I don't know what they had thrown in that pot for us at that time, but we're getting to eat whatever scraps it was. And I could feel, there's conversation around there that asked me, is there a dance that you do in New Zealand? They're pretending to have these accents and broken English and talking pidgin and all that sort of stuff. And they're like, is there this dance? Like, yes. And they, you will do it for us. And Nick, out of nowhere, I had no idea. He said, would you like us? He put up his hand and he's like, would you like us to, support in the background? And the staff said yes. So then these other guys, Nick's just dropped the rest of our team into the Haka with the rest of us. I'm at the front. We just did Camaraderie. But man, just to know that Nick and the rest of the people in our patrol at that time, I don't remember everybody, but I certainly remember Nick had my back, or had each other's back, had my back in that instance.
Yeah.
Is one of the a really great memory.
We had no idea. We had no idea what that was. We knew that we had to be loud and we had to try and mirror as closely as what you said. If you look behind you, you would have seen like interpretive dance. And Haka. It was just arms and legs going everywhere, and tongues.
Yeah. I wonder if I don't know if they did. Well, probably didn't have smartphones then, but I wonder if there was some sort of recording of that. But that was a good time. It was a great memory.
It would have got a lot of hits, I'm sure, Joe.
Yeah. Would have got a lot of hits, all right. A lot of uppercuts would have been thrown my way. Bro, thanks for talking about those, Nick. Really, really great. And it's these things here, for me anyway, to be able to have this banter, this laugh, and trigger memories that just is another reason why you hold such a strong place in my heart and mind. One of the things I was sharing with Brian off camera was that my first recollection of meeting you, I was sitting in the mess by myself at a table, and I don't know if you remember this, but you came up to me, you left your guys, you came up to me, introduced yourself, and invited me to come over to sit with you guys at the table. And that to me, man, I've never forgotten that. It was such a really powerful moment for me, because I'm brand new. I don't know anybody there. And then you welcomed me over. You didn't know who I was, brought me over, sat me down at the table. And and then I started to meet Woodsy and a few other boys at that table, and became friends with you guys. So really appreciate that, man.
That was me going through lucky dip, because you might have turned out to be a moron. I don't know. It turned out really well.
Actually, you know what? I think based on what I've heard in the other podcasts, which we're going to have the links to, I think that was part of your planning and preparation. I'll suss out this guy, see what he's like. If he's a moron, pick
the biggest guy and make friends with him. That's what it was.
Okay, Sam.
But we've all been new guys in battalions as well. Like, it's not our first time being new to a space. It's one of those things like, it's the same thing about talking about our previous experiences. It's like, well, everyone's been through the same thing, or to a certain degree. Well, why do we have to repeat history? Why don't we just go say hello to the new people? But the culture there was a little bit different in terms of being standoffish, because I think everyone's trying to protect their reputation, whereas I didn't have one in the first place. So fair enough. I just want to, if anyone looks like they're part of our team, especially because you come to our platoon, well, why don't we kick it off straight away and say hello? Why not?
That's actually an interesting point, Nick. I guess some may see as part of the whole process being this is me, dog eat dog type of situation, but the way you're describing it is not that. It sounds like it's no, who can we embrace to support us, and we're all in this together. Would that be fair?
I mean, to me, it's I'm very much the one team sort of. Like, we all did selection. We're all picked to be there. We've all picked on our traits and characteristics. I've never met a not good bloke there. I've never met someone who to at least to the majority's perspective didn't deserve to be there. So I like to give the benefit of the doubt. Like, at the end of the day, it might be idealistic, but it hasn't really come back at me in any way. In fact, it's helped me build relationships, if anything. But giving people the benefit of the doubt is critical, because, well, yes, we have all passed selection, and why can't I give them the benefit of the doubt, say that, well, this person's worthy to go up and say hello to and welcome. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. No harm, no foul. But at the same time, you might as well kick it off on a good foot and make the best impression you can early, because that's really, I think, that's what I thought we were selected for. Our ability to work in amongst people who don't necessarily speak the same language as us, in different cultures on the other side of the world, whose values are essentially human values, essentially similar, but their society is completely different. We've got to make things happen. That's why I thought we were what we were selected for. So why don't we start that process in our own backyard?
Man,
wow,
awesome.
That's powerful.
It is, eh? Yeah, that's a great insight, man. I love that, and I actually, I thought you were a Kiwi when I first met you, and until you
Greek. You didn't call
yeah.
me Greek, so
Well, yeah, I thought you were Kiwi until you spoke, and I was like, hang on, he's not a Kiwi.
Learners of speech.
Unless he's
Right.
been born and raised over here, unless his parents are Kiwi, but he's been born and raised here. Yeah, but that was one of the things that went through my mind.
My mum's an islander.
Your mum is an islander.
Yeah.
Right, and because your mum and dad were at the Beret Parade, eh?
They were, yeah.
I'm pretty sure the picture that I've got has got your mum sitting in the shot.
Right.
It's as I'm grabbing mine at that time when they're coming up, whoever took the photos, and when we ended up getting them, but I'm pretty sure it's your mum. I'll show you it after.
Yeah, cool.
Hey, what, in your experience, so we're going to look into, so some of the questions that we've got, there's a guy by the name of Chris Webber. There's a few other people, but I'll shout out Chris Webber in terms of his support and what he's been doing. He's been really enjoying, Kiwi fella down in Wellington, been really enjoying the information being shared. And he sent through a few questions, and I've sort of just packaged them or done up a few of them to maybe suit. And so in here, one of the questions that he's sort of asking is, and I've reframed it. So in your experience, Nick, what are the sorts of qualities in candidates that stand out, both positive and or maybe not so positive? What are those qualities that stand out to you or that have stood out to you in terms of those that continue to carry on and make their way through?
Yeah, I guess, well, that view, that my understanding of this has evolved over time, obviously. So, I mean, doing a selection each before we did actually the CARTA course.
Yeah.
And then helping out back on the CARTA course after becoming an operator. And then obviously, as we, this is now 19 years later since selection. And, two of our partners are still working in the unit. And when you look at their traits and characteristics, that to me is, okay, if I was to shape and model or try to mentor someone towards what these characteristics are, big one's humility. Obviously, there's that thing where you've got to have that grit and you've got to have that resilience to see out a 21-day course and the subsequent 18 months or so after that.
Yep.
And then potentially getting asked to do the job as we were asked to do the job in full-scale war, effectively. And you look back at that, humility is a big player here, because what humility does is it allows you the bandwidth to look at yourself, do a bit of self-reflection, assess, okay, where am I doing well, where am I doing poorly, and how can I do better? And that, that gut check or that objective check, the more you do it, the more objective it gets. And you just surround yourself with people who think that way as well, then the more rigorous and more robust that analysis is. So you got individuals who will not stop trying to get better. Now, even though they're not in the unit anymore, don't have to be warfighters anymore. They're still trying to get better as dads, as brothers, as sons, as mates, as business partners, whatever it is. So, and it all starts with humility. Ego is that one of those things that will destroy most operators. It's just one of those things that it's the issue, but the counter to that is humility. Humility, and if you pass the bar, you get to wear water your beret, and you're deemed worthy enough to do the job for your country. But what will keep you there and keep you evolving is your ability to have a good look at yourself, not think you're there yet. Realise that you're still chasing something, but then keeping that in check with quietly having a bit of confidence about yourself and being able to say, okay, I'm not there yet, but I believe I can do anything. I've just got to find a way. There is a process for everything. I'm not the first person to do this. I've just got to find a way. So, I'd say humility. Having a sense of humour is also pretty important. In our space, it's really, really important to be able to see the light side, especially when things get really serious and, situation consequences are quite high. So, that's a big aspect. And even just, people say to me, well, how do you develop a sense of humour? Well, just find Will Ferrell for one thing. You can steal someone else's stuff. You're stealing someone else's stuff, and it's in the time where everyone's just peaking, or everyone's just really stressed out. People will be able to be like, oh yeah, I saw that movie or whatever. It doesn't have to be your own stuff. You just have 10 jokes or 10 one-liners or something that you refer to all the time, and sooner or later you become that person because you're practicing that over and over again. But your sense of humour is really important. Humility is really important, and just that drive. To not stop, not settle, not think that we've reached the top. Yeah, fair enough, we wear the beret, but there's a next goal. It might be being a 2IC or being a better breacher or being a better medic, or it might be being a PC. You know, it might be whatever. And then after that, it might be being a better dad. You know, just have something that's going to continue to drive you. And all these guys, you know, 99.9% of them have got a drive. They've got a 10-year plan. They've got something else that they're aiming for after this, whatever this is.
Yeah, awesome.
Wow. Joe, that reminds me, we need to get Will Ferrell on this podcast.
Yeah, you need to get Will Ferrell on this podcast.
I've just made a note. Special Forces
gold.
operator. Yeah, that's it. SF operator. Will Ferrell.
Well, there is that saying: you think it, you speak it, you act, it happens.
Yeah.
So let's see how we go. Yeah, we've thought it. It's been spoken. Brian, you're tasked with actioning that.
It's done. Yep. It's done. I'll reach out to Will Ferrell.
Hey, I'm just going to mention here, your camera keeps dropping out, bro. Nick, it just says cameras disabled due to slow internet connection. Video is still recorded. So we can still hear you. We're just going to carry on, if that's all right with you. You can still hear us, eh?
Yeah, I can, absolutely. Yeah, I'll fix my, I'll switch my networks.
Sweet. All right, cool. We'll let you do that, but I'll ask you a question as we go while you're doing that. Hey, as you know, on our selection, bro, they handed us out a piece of paper, and it was our opportunity to fill it out. Do you remember that? If we wanted to withdraw from the selection, and it was early on in the piece.
Yeah.
My question is, did you ever reach a point or a moment where you thought about signing that piece of paper?
No.
Yeah, awesome.
No, never.
What did you do with yours when you got it? I think I might have asked you this.
It didn't register with me. I don't know. I don't know what I did with it. Like, it wasn't even in my consciousness to say I'm out. Like, I've been thinking about this every single minute of every day for probably 10 years up to that point.
Yeah.
So it was. I was so convinced that this is where I was meant to be. That there was no entertainment. You know, and I can say it hand on my heart, like that whole experience for me. I mean, going through the commando courses actually helps temper you as well. Like, helps forge your resilience and helps forge your
I bet
you want to be there. Because there's other courses that are in the Army holds that are hard courses. Probably not necessarily as hard as a Carter course because it's so long, effectively. But there's other ways to make you, gut check yourself to make you more ardent that you are going to continue on this thing that you had planned to do, or check yourself out. So I don't remember that paper, but it was probably, I didn't want it to register in my consciousness. Maybe, I don't know.
I'm pretty sure, and that's interesting because everybody, well, the guys that I've spoken to anyway, not just during the podcast, but whilst we're in, like yourself now, here and now, and that's what I was saying, I'm pretty sure I've asked you this before. I think that piece of paper, because they told us to keep it in our pocket or whatever, fill it out, whatever. I remember when I got mine and I read what it was because I didn't know what it was. I waited till the staff went looking and I ripped it up and threw it away so that there was no, and I'm pretty sure guys like you and other guys that we had did similar things, or we screwed it up and just ditched it. As good because it left us no option then. But
it's like you burn the boats. You know, you don't have a way to get back home. You got to go forward, and that's it. So you give yourself no other option, and that's one way of doing it. Just rip that paper up.
Yeah.
Well, that's actually quite fascinating because when you think about, like, again, my reality is based on YouTube, movies, Hollywood. All right, and you look at the SEALs, and I think they have a tradition of ringing the bell to quit or something similar. I mean, the option is there, but you have no option. There is only one way to go forward. It's like, man, but to get to that point where there is no option, so why? Why does that keep driving you? I mean, you could hide the paper. I mean, you and Joe just talked about that, but it's just what's up here that makes you go, well, stuff that, I don't want that. Boom, go forward.
Well, I think some things don't deserve negotiation. I think that
beautiful.
You don't give it a look in. At the end of the day, there's I mean, I'll look back and go, so this is the truth for me. Like, this is where there's no variation on this. It's either forward or nowhere else. But I also know that we were lucky because we came from a unit that was basically at the precipice of going going to out of this orbit. And the Camaraderie Regiment has well and truly earned its right to be called a Special Forces unit. So we would very much have to just go back to that space, and I've still got some of my best mates are still in that unit, all have left and still as civvies still my best mates. And you look at that and you go, okay, there's a good option to go back to, but I've literally got to burn the boats here. I've literally got to give myself no other option, because not that I think I'll do it, but it actually reinforces what I said I would do. And if you do what you say you'll do to yourself, and when no one knows what you said it, that's probably more powerful than telling someone that you're going to do something and then they know that you've done what you said you would do, if that makes sense.
It does.
So just trust yourself that you're not gonna pull off that, and if you had the option, maybe you take it, maybe you wouldn't, but it's no longer an option. It's not even on the radar.
Awesome, man. Beautifully put. Hey, what mentors tools did you use, if any? Obviously the driver's there, it's easy to see the integrity behind the decision that you've made, burning the boats and the bridges, so to speak, in terms of there's no way back, you're just powering forward and continuing on. Were there any other things that came to mind? For the reason that I ask you this, bro, is because I know that you're obviously very intelligent, and I'm going to talk a bit about that with the planning and stuff that you've done, business, investing, all that sort of thing. But I didn't have any mental strategies. I was just, I just went straight in. I'm here, I'm doing this. If I get kicked off, I'm going to go away, try and get better, and I'm going to come back and do it again. That was as far as my mental strategy went. Did you have some tools or things like that you used to help you navigate your way through the selection?
Well, I think one of the things was I had a saying that was always in my head.
Yeah.
I wasn't really conscious that I was going to use it until I started using it on Happy Wanderer. It was that I'm still alive. That's it. It's a song by POD. It's a American band, which I don't think they've got one song. I don't know about the rest of the album, but I heard this song. All it says, I'm still alive. So if I'm conscious, I've still got 2 arms and 2 legs. I can still walk, put one foot in front of the other, and I can still think. I'm still going. And this isn't anywhere near survival for me. So if that's the case, I might as well keep going.
Awesome.
And the dream was still, etched into my head as a 10-year-old that I was going to become a commander or something like that. And all I'm doing is continuing what I'd grown in my brain to do. But it was interesting that you would say that too, because it becomes part of your DNA just to think this way. It's something that you may have to train yourself to do it. But if you say that you didn't have to go through any mental process yourself, it's because it's already part of your DNA. At some point, some time in your life, whether you were considering joining the army or not, you actually had these thoughts that will keep you driving forward. And that's it. It's sometimes it's nurture, sometimes it's nature. But whatever it is, it's a process that doesn't happen overnight, because you can be an inflection point during selection where it's just the hardest you thought it would be, and you just make a rash decision that point to pull off.
Yeah. And
in that split second you made that decision, you can't go back, because the DS have got you a bit of paper and you're gone.
Yeah.
So you don't want to ever to have that option or have that chance come across your table. You've got to actually condition your mind to give yourself no other option than to go forward. And you had that in your head, but that was part of your DNA that you fostered. Whether it's part of your nature or you've nurtured it, I don't know. But at the same time, past selection, it's very much the same. I either thought about it or I didn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. They got through it. So it's part of your DNA, effectively.
Awesome, man. Love that. Hey, I still got a couple more on the selection. I hope that's all right. You just let us know if this needs to end or if you need to go somewhere. We'd be happy to reconnect. But yeah. Bro, can you remember, so with regards to your training, were there specific elements? So for me, just to try to give a bit more context, all I'd heard about was the 3.2. There's the 3.2 that you got to do and all that sort of stuff. So for me, I probably didn't give it as much attention as I should have, because I naively thought, well, I can run a 2.4 in 8 minutes 15, 8 minutes 30, thereabouts. But that was, shorts and t-shirt, not with the full DPM and webbing and rifle and that sort of stuff. So I probably didn't train for it as well as I could. But was there any specific parts of the selection that you thought you needed to prepare a little bit more on, or that you spent a little bit more time preparing for the selection?
If I could go back again, I'd do more time with a pack on and more running. Yeah. I remember when we did our SBET together, I don't know whether you remember this, but I'm pretty sure that the past time back then was 15 minutes 30 for the 3.2.
Yeah, I think I remembered it being 16 minutes because I only came just under 16 minutes.
Yes. Well, I was literally a split second behind you on that
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
I
I was
remember
like,
that.
oh man, I should have put my effort into this running thing.
and we just made it because I remember,
Yeah, just like,
I remember you talking to that,
yeah.
man. I think you mentioned something about, if you were staying relatively in touch with me, then
Yeah.
we were going to be good. And I think I significantly underestimated that.
Yeah, well, I'd run it before. I had run it before, and I was very confident that I was under 15:30 every
Yeah.
time.
Right.
Then
Okay. Maybe it was.
you add the nervous energy, and then you add the actual occasion, the energy burn from the occasion itself, and then the instructor pressure, and all that. You know, you're being watched all the time, and then all the stuff that we did before the 3.2 as well.
Yeah.
So you're already pretty fatigued. So if you add in 30 seconds on, you're actually not doing too badly, but you don't want to just get in by the skin of your teeth either.
Yeah.
So, but mate, we got through. Past the
Yeah.
past.
We got through. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, you
With
got me
a
through.
yeah, we managed to get each other through. And yeah, that was a definite eye opener for me. And just on that barrier testing, I don't know if I shared this with you, but I remember getting spoken to because that 3-day barrier testing that we did, I got spoken to at the end. You know, when we finished up, my memory of it might be a bit hazy, but we were then spoken to about whether or not we could progress and do the SASR selection. And I hadn't done that well because what I realized after, because I sweat a lot anyway when I'm training and stuff, but I had lost that much. I didn't think of it in terms of electrolytes and salts and all that sort of stuff that my body was losing. So on the navigation phases after the 3.2 and everything, and all the other arduous stuff had been done, I cramped up massively out in the bush while we were doing the navigation. And I didn't, I think I did maybe just the bare minimum of the amount of navigational legs that I needed to complete to even be considered. And I remember getting pulled over to the side and spoken to and told in no uncertain terms that the amount of distance that I had covered wasn't anywhere near what I should have covered because of where I had come from. And but they said, but they were still going to let me go through to onto selection. So I was grateful for that. But it opened my eyes up too for me, and why I asked you that question. 3.2 is tough for anybody. What I needed to work on, and I needed to make sure that I put salt and pepper on my food, because I never did that. Like coming from here, I never added salt or anything. But those little things I started learning and going, man, I'm in a different environment. I'm in a different stage here in a different country. Even the magnetic variation's different to what I've been doing back in NZ. So I need to make sure I get us to the right place. But that stuff, man, did you have any other things that you specifically worked on? So you mentioned you would have worked on more pack marching and more running. What did you sort of focus on prior to selection for you?
Well, I mean, I've focused on everything. I think if you like, it's pretty hard to say I focused on everything, but I've tried to train everything in as up to my knowledge of training at that time. I thought I was doing everything right, and we were very lucky we didn't have to go to work once we got back from Timor. We were given the freedom to train effectively. So we're getting paid we paid athletes to prepare for this thing. So we're very, very fortunate. So like I look back and I go, okay, well, up to that point, based on the knowledge I had about training at the time, I'm confident that if I'd failed selection, I couldn't do any better. That was my thing in my head, that like this is right now. If I don't get through now, there's not much point going again, because I don't think I could ever get a better preparation than this. Maybe I'll get fitter. And the other thing is I was training with, I can't say his name, but I was training with, we'll call him Zulu. Yeah. I was training with him, and he made me feel terrible about my chances of passing selection.
He makes everybody feel terrible.
So this guy, and to this day, I'm still one of the fittest guys you'll ever meet in your life. And back then, he was the benchmark in terms of all levels of fitness in every domain of fitness. He fit the bill completely, to the point where he runs out of track. You know, they give him a time march and they say, "Oh, no one will get this far." Next thing you know, Tim rocks up. Yeah, I can't get his name.
That's right. There's lots of.
Yes, he's. So I'm thinking, okay, this guy, this is the standard. I'm just going to chase him. I'm just going to try and keep up with him. But it's a creeping line. You get to it, the further it gets away from you. So I was taking those hits to my ego on a daily basis, but at the same time, I knew I was meeting the minimum requirements for what I knew about the barrier testing and what I knew from the guys who had actually done selection in our cohort that we're working with at Commandos. So I was still pretty confident to put my name down and give it a good crack. But at the same time, looking back on the knowledge, obviously it's 20 years later, knowing now, passing on that information is absolutely critical for us. Is to let these guys know that if we want to make the next generation better than we were, then we've got to pay this stuff forward. You know, make sure you get your electrolytes, make sure you account for the air temperature, make sure you do your distance with the pack, make sure you don't increase the loads too quickly, otherwise you break yourself. You know, all these sorts of things. But I think based on the knowledge we had, there was a bit of luck to get through. There's a bit of a science. You know, we can pretty much pretty accurately predict if we've got someone who we think is going to get picked up. So that's where it is for us at the moment. But back then, I wish I'd known what we know now. But so the best thing we do is help those guys who are where we were, who are now where we were 20 years ago, and girls.
Awesome.
Wow, that's actually, it's fascinating to hear that there's a science around. I mean, it makes sense when you're talking about it. Like, you know, you're talking about kinesiology, the physiology. You're talking about sports science. You're talking all those things. You're essentially a elite athlete type situation, as you described. Well, you had 3 weeks to prepare for that, but to hear you describe that, because I think some of the earlier podcasts that you've had, Joe, and the people on there, they talk about, just put the pack on, hump up and down a mortar box, you know, just to get the legs going or whatever, you know, and it's like, we just do it. But to hear you describe it, it's like, that's actually quite fascinating, because I'm thinking that if you need to be able to get to X, to be able to do X effectively in the most efficient way, you need to pay attention not only to your body, but your surroundings as well. Yeah, the air temperature, I didn't even consider that, to be honest, from my perspective. So I guess what I'm getting at is saying that if you were to go through selection again, would you pay a lot more attention to it, or do you think that's something that would just be you're already aware of because of where the Army has evolved since 20 years ago, or whatever it is?
Well, I think it's where the Army and where science has evolved since 20 years ago. I mean, there's been lots, because these are brands. Like SAS is a brand, and it's an elite brand, and so the mindset around that is that, well, there's incremental increases that we can make here, because it's basically the laws of diminishing returns, where you're starting with a raw element, you'll make a lot of return from a little bit of effort, but as you get to the higher levels, you're looking at minute returns, almost insignificant returns based on a whole lot of effort. So there's been a lot more research done in that space to say, how can we incrementally get more out of what we're putting in here and get longer life out of our soldiers as well once they get into the unit. So there's more information. You know, when we come through, Joe mentioned we didn't have smartphones back then. We didn't have Google. We didn't have access to information at our fingertips. And fair enough, a lot of the information out there now is not accurate or won't really help you. There is really good gold out there, which if you dig hard enough and you find it, and it's usually coming from people who've been there, and it should be coming from people who've been there, backed by the science of the studies done on those people who've been there. And we've been very lucky that a lot of these tier 1 units have gone through that process. They got these really smart people from universities all over the world, and they analysed operators, every aspect of what they do, pre-service, pre-selection, as an operator, and then post-selection as well now. So we've got to leverage that info. And when you look at it now, it's definitely a process. You know, it's no longer something where we're just going to stick our finger in the wind and just see where the wind goes. You know, now it's like, okay, there's all these factors here, and we can calculate. We can make an assumption on a few certain things because there's already evidence of it. There's already been a study case to use. And then you combine that with the science, and now the X factor is the resilience piece. The X factor is the part where you burn the boats and you find what's within you to keep going, regardless of whether you think you're going to pass or not. That's one of those things that it's got to be, whether it's nurture or nature, like I said before, there's got to be an element of effort put into defining as much of that as possible, and we're literally trying to find a way to manage that, find a metric around it, so we can manage it. But it's still a shifting. You know, it's like trying to punch smoke. You know what I mean? It's just very, very it's elusive. But once we get our finger on it, then that'll crack the egg for a lot of not just the military, the society in general. But going back to selection, it's a process now. If you can understand what essentially the selection process is really well honed and really well defined, and because it's really well defined, you can define processes around those goals that have been defined. Yeah. And there's now a track record to state that we'll get this outcome if we do this work. We'll get it optimally if we do this other work. And that's our goal. That's our job for the last 10 years, is to basically design that to the point where it's as good as we can get it at the moment.
Awesome, man. And that's the stuff that, man, really well put. There's a whole bunch to unpack in what you've just mentioned there, Nick. But I want to jump and skip to a couple of things that you mentioned in there. And I wonder if you would be okay speaking about that's sort of what you guys are doing now, right? Just with one aspect. So obviously there's the gym. We're gonna talk about the Mill Gym a little bit more in terms of what you guys specifically do, not how it was founded and all that sort of stuff, but more focusing on what you guys do now and the evolution of it and what you guys are doing. But it sounds like, is that part of what your package is providing at the mill, right? That science, or backed with some science approach with actual operators or former serving operators that have been there, helping a cohort of people that come through that have a desire to, whether that's to go to TRG or whether that's to go to the unit or whatever. Is that what you guys are doing at the moment?
Yeah, I mean that's where the way it's gravitated, I guess.
Yeah.
We had it, even when we were working together, we had it loosely in our head that that's what we would be doing eventually, somehow in some description, some form.
Yeah.
But because we SAS is our background, and guys are still operating at the moment who own this joint. So the live feed of information coming back in terms of how preparation needs to be shaped for people who don't know where to start effectively. Yep. We've got a live feed on that, and we shift as that shifts, and we learn as the new information comes out. And we've got lab rats here, which basically they kick it into action straight away, and they give us feedback straight away. Like, it's not just our coaches. Like, our coaches here, they've all got a goal. Like, we've just lost one to TRG. We've just lost another to SAS. We've lost one to being he's a doctor. We lost one 2 years ago to being a doctor. So we're getting these. We've got people within our organisation who've got this. It's not just about the training. It's about what the training opens, what doors that training opens for us. Yep. In terms of developing our mentality as well. So we're getting these feeds from different trades, professions, crafts, whatever it is that they're doing. But when you look at it, when you boil it down to it, it's still at high functioning, elite level. I don't not necessarily like the word elite, but high functioning individuals who are big contributors in whatever space they're going into. They all think very similarly. So now, if we create a space where everyone's surrounded by those sorts of people, whether you're going for SAS, TRG, or you want to become a doctor or whatever, or you want to be the best housewife or house dad you want to ever in the world, well, we've got a culture now that we've been fighting hard to try and foster. And just so happens we have so far 100% strike rate on all the people who have done selection, who have done our complete process. Every element of our process have been picked up for further training for TRG, SAS.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, so it's been good.
That's huge.
You know what? It's fascinating you describe it, because you tie that back to what you said earlier. The rules of the game, understand the rules of the game, leverage the patterns. There's a process, rather than just thinking, oh, yep, I'm going to rock up and do this, or whatever, because that might be my mentality if I was to try it. I probably wouldn't get far. I'll probably be signing that paper as soon as I joined, if I did that. But, if you understand the rules of the game, we understand the pattern, and this is going to be useful, for those, I can see that being useful for those in the future, because if they understand it, because I can imagine you as a 10-year-old, and as Joe as a 14-year-old go, oh, the SAS, wow, this is so cool. The stories that go with it, but understand the game and the process behind it will help you continue to go forward. I find that actually fascinating. I never even thought about that before. That's so cool. I like the way you put that.
I told you he was clever.
Yeah, scholar.
Okay, so he's going to start losing credibility for the show. But that's it. It's like. I mean, there's every industry has its own language. Every industry has its own progression, and if you want to work in that industry, you have to follow the progression effectively. And there's been outliers who skip some steps, and there's some freaks out there. We've worked with some freaks as well, and at the end of the day, you've got to humble yourself to the pattern, to the program. If you don't abide by the rules of the game, whether they be the rules of the jungle or the rules of life or the rules of society or relationships or all that sort of stuff, then you won't thrive. You won't succeed in those environments. So if we try to make it simple, it's just understand, okay, this is going to happen. This is more than likely what's going to happen next. After that, you'll probably do this. Like, that's at its very, very simplest form, because the selection process is really well documented at the moment.
Yeah.
There are some variations year to year, and still to this day there are variations, but there's only a few ways you can select certain characteristics about people, and so you can't vary that too often. But then the way they're doing it now is becoming to the point where you don't really have to drive these guys and girls into the ground to get it. But we still want to test the X factor. We still want to test whether they are resilient enough to see this chaos and this adversity through to the end of this 21 days. So for that reason, you have to but intelligently put pressure on the candidates to try and elicit this X factor, this grittiness.
That's awesome, man. And that's such a good point that you've spoken about, because that's the stuff, sounds like, of what you guys are doing, particularly with the success rate, the 100% strike rate so far. But I love how you've talked about, you've identified this process, and as Brian's talked about, linking that back and being able to humble yourself to that process and go through that. It's cool that they're developing and gaining these tools to go, okay, well, this is likely what's going to happen next. And that may not happen, but through that process and by them being in your guys' environment with what you provide there, they develop enough resilience to be able to adapt, or adaptability to be able to adapt to that process. So when you're saying it does vary a little bit from selection to selection, they know they've got that in reserve because of by the sounds of things of what you guys put them through there. Would that be right in terms of some of the stuff that's happening with you guys, Nick?
Yeah, because the main thing is culture. Like, they're all intelligent people. I would argue that the soldiers today are smarter than we were. They got far more information at their fingertips. So by the time they get there, at least they're more informed about selection than we ever were back then. But they've also got a wider general knowledge, because information is coming at them every day, 24 hours a day, through all different media sources. So, and then we've got a whole bunch of fairly large cohort who are already established in their previous careers and decide they want to go 90 degrees and join the army and become an SAS operator. So you've got pilots, you've got doctors, you've got scientists, you've got geologists, you've got all manner of people coming through to try their hand at becoming an operator, which is really good too, because it adds to the corporate knowledge of the unit, makes the unit more capable, makes Australia more capable effectively. So, and they always give a different spin on stuff that we take for granted, and that in itself makes units like that more capable, because now we're solving problems from different angles. And if we don't welcome these new ideas, we couldn't call ourselves elite at the end of the day, because they've got to consistently evolve. So all we're trying to do here is basically say, okay, the culture, the initial part of selection is basically to take all the oxygen away from you, so that you think that you can't think, so that you think that you can't do anything else but do what you're being told. And keep that headspace that you will not last. You have to think. You have to find the leverage. You have to find the oxygen bubbles. You have to, all that sort of stuff. So you create space for yourself and get more comfortable in that constrictive environment. So that's why the Carter camp for us is about just putting the pressure on from the first second it starts, and not relenting on the pressure till the minute they finish, because that's where most people crumble. Otherwise, really smart and people who could really contribute to that community, we'd lose them, because they just don't get that the culture is. This is not what work is like there every day. As you know, like when we get there to unit, it's pretty crazy. When it's time to work, we're working pretty hard, but we're not getting shouted at. We're not marching around everywhere like the battalions are. We're not. A lot of that stuff doesn't apply to us because it's an adult environment. So you just got to get through the first 3 weeks of just graft and being treated like a knuckle dragger. So once you're through that. Once you drag your knuckles for 3 weeks, you pretty much you can unleash your wings, so to speak.
Man.
But that's the headspace. So we just got to get these smart people through that understanding that you just got to see this through, and you got to maximise yourself as much as you can in that space. because you'll get selected on your ability to do that. Seeing through doesn't guarantee you that you'll get picked up, but growing in the space and showing your contribution is increasing throughout that pressure and that chaos is what you're getting selected on.
Awesome.
It's really interesting as well, because it's probably what you may have seen this on TV, Nick, here in Oz, the SAS Australia program, but they do. Yeah, they do a lot of shouting, a lot more shouting than
they do a lot of shouting. Yeah, it's good TV.
It's good TV.
It's a good show.
Yeah, but isn't it interesting? Like the last series they had Sam Burgess and they had a couple of others, but they got to the end and there was like 3 or 4 of them, I think, but only Sam was picked up, and they said it was the 1%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I'm not going to comment on the show. It's those guys are credible guys. Like they are operators. Yeah, they are veterans, real veterans, and they've done some really cool stuff and really brave stuff.
Yeah.
But the parameters of the show, the rules of the game in TV land dictate that things must be run a certain way. And from my experience, that selection is not run. There's elements of that are very similar to real selection, but there are a lot of elements that are not. And mate, it's the biggest show on TV, so all power to them. But there is probably half maybe 25% of the shouting for one thing, and a lot of it's about you making conclusions about your own performance rather than having someone give you some external feedback on whether you're doing poorly or really well. That's right. All you're getting back is feedback about how poorly you're doing and no good stuff. It's up to you to keep yourself in the game and motivate yourself to stay there. And that internal conversation is the want to get through to candidates is that it doesn't matter what the world's having, doing what's happening in the world or what the world's doing. At the end of the day, if you're good up here and in your heart as well, then that keeps you in the game. Stay on that track. Keep that conversation going. But if you look at the show, like we're very fortunate to have trained students or candidates on the show. And to tell you the truth, the first series we had one of our guys on it. It was a bit of a step change because we didn't fully know what to expect in terms of how the production would run. If we had another third crack at it, we'd do a lot better. But then these people we've trained, they are exceptional individuals, really successful in their own trade or craft or sport or profession. But the culture aspect of it in terms of how these things run is different to their cultural aspect in terms of how the way their sports run. So you just got to get your head around that, and that's where we've got to look. Okay, we can probably pivot the way we train future candidates or celebrities for these shows, so we can get more. They can get more out of it. But you talk to them, they said, "Oh mate, that was everything I wanted, everything expected, and more." When I did that show, I really wanted to see what it was like, and I'm glad I got it, even if they didn't last the full 2 weeks or whatever it was.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome, man. Great points, and you've really sort of segued in nicely to I want to get into cycle, but I just want to talk about some of the things and re-emphasize the stuff that you talked about. That drive for excellence is a constant in it, and that's obviously what you guys do there. And obvious 12 years, is it 12 years now, 13 years, 13 years?
Yeah, 13
with
years.
The mill? Yeah, still hammering and doing really well and being really super successful, which is awesome. But I like the points that you talked about in the selection. So I haven't seen the show over there in the Australian side. I've just seen news articles and stuff, bits and pieces. But I've seen similar where there is a lot of yelling and shouting, and as we know, Nick, that's sort of not really the reality. You're always given the impression, and Bill Bestick shared this, a good friend of mine, you're always given that impression that you're failing. And I love how you spoke about it's that internal conversation that we have with ourselves to keep ourselves in the game. You always, and they always give you a look like, is that all you've got? Is that what you think is expected? Do you think that's good enough? And you just constantly you feel like that knuckle dragger for the 3 weeks that you talked about. So this now, I'm going to close off the selection piece and sort of move into the cycle, because what you've talked about, I want to try to link in here. And cycle, obviously, there's 10 to 18 months depending on how things go. What was that like for you from the need to absorb a heck of a lot of information, because there's a lot of information during the cycle that's condensed, compressed, that we're expected to take on and then apply effectively. What was that like for you? Not only, so 2 parts, the absorption of the information required, and also the need to then rapidly apply it as effectively as you can. What was that like for you on the cycle?
I mean, obviously, it was a challenge. I think for all of us, to say it wasn't a challenge would be probably lying to yourself. But I think if you like, you're so keen, you're so invested in this process that you could be told to clean toilets with a toilet brush, with a toothbrush for 10 weeks, and you do it because if that's got you to where you're going, then you're going to do it. And I think that helps a lot. Like, no matter how much pressure they put on you to learn, it's stuff you want to learn. And you want to learn it so bad that you'll study it at night, and you'll take your books home. Like, I don't think there's any guys there that were nerds at school that would do that at school. But that school, absolutely learn. I got to the point where I buy a toy pistol and be in my room. This might sound like a confession to you, Joe, too, but
It's all right. Yes, I'm ready. Confession time. Yes.
I'm sitting there in front of my mirror, and I'm actually drawing my pistol out of my holster to try and get my drills dialed in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the amount of study that you're prepared to do to get it right, to get through first time every time. And I wouldn't say that everyone would do that, but some of you guys probably think I'm a nerd for doing that. But I also see myself lucky as having started at university before I did commando selection. So that process of learning, one, seeing that that's not the life I wanted to do, that academic, that stream, but two, knowing that, okay, there are ways to learn here which some work better for me than others. So I'm going to stick with the ones that work better for me.
Yeah.
And even retaining numbers so I studied languages in uni as part of my degree. And so even verbatim trying to learn an English word, a foreign word next to an English word, and just doing that really just, mechanically studying something was just got my head around this whole study process. So it was still a challenge, but I found that I still loved it. I still enjoyed even the pressure of the CQB course, for example. There's so many things you can do wrong there, and so many things you get failed on. But I found that once I understood the rules of that game, I learned to love it. I know we were breaking up. Actually, I think we were broken up into two sections when we came back from Iraq. You were on one CQB part of the course, I was on the other course, and we had to do this drill where we had paint in our MP5s, and we basically half of that course stood on one line facing one way, facing the other way. The other half stood on the other line facing the other way. And we had to go turn. We turn, and we have to shoot the opposite number with our.
Yeah, that's right.
And they just whittled it down over a bunch of fixtures to get to the last two. And it was me and Robbo, and as the last two. And I just picked him. I just turned around and hit him in the elbow. It wasn't a kill shot, but I counted, so I'll take it. But then I looked over, and you were doing this jump where you're clicking your heels together with all your CQB gear on, because you'd gone on the other side as well. I just remember that blazing in my head, this big Maori guy in the air, like something like out of The Sound of Music, clicking his heels and jumping for joy. Because he'd run on that side.
Oh man, yeah, that's. I remember that, man. And yes, I remember I did jump up, and that's a very accurate description. I jumped up in the air, clicked my heels together. Yeah, man.
You said something like woohoo or something like that. Your gas mask.
I did. And I remember that drill was that was so funny. Yeah. So there was you and I on the opposite ends, and I remember, I won't mention his. Well, I'll mention his nickname. Donk was the other guy that was on there, and so we're coming forward, and I remember on the turn calls, and we got the turn. So whenever you got the turn, your weapon had to come straight up, be pointing at the person. And one of the turns, thankfully, lucky for him, the DS didn't say to go because he said turned, brought my weapon straight up, and Donk turned and had his weapon down. So I had him beaded the whole time, and I'm just thinking, come on, give the word, but he didn't. So then we had to turn back. Then we turned. Donk had his weapon up the next time, but it was too slow. I got him, and I was stoked. And I was like, yes. So, did you not celebrate? I didn't see you celebrate like that, mate.
No, I just went like this.
Joe, the Australians are a lot more reserved when they celebrate.
They were more reserved in their celebration.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's there's a memory. Thanks for bringing that up. Hey, you know what? What I like about that, when you spoke about getting a toy pistol to practice that. The only reason I didn't do that is because I didn't think of that, you know. So I was busy. This was my pistol, pointing my finger. So yeah. So that, you know, that in and of itself, like, man, that would have been very helpful for me. But anyway, good that you did that, and thanks for sharing that, because I only didn't do it because I didn't think of doing something like that, and maybe I might have thought it might have looked weird if I went in and brought a toy gun.
I don't care.
Yeah, it's awesome. Hey, what was some of your, so aside from seeing me in The Sound of Music audition, jumping up, clicking my heels, what were some of your favorite thoughts or memories from the cycle as a whole? Because there was a whole bunch, man. There's stuff that sort of runs through my head. Is there anything that stands out for you during the, whether it was the CQB, whether it was patrol procedures, whether it was, because you would have, whether it was doing the parachuting stuff or combat survival or anything like that, because we weren't in the same groups for a lot of those sorts of courses and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, you could probably go course by course. There's something there that I remember about all of them that was
true.
To me, it was like, you know, just thinking about it now makes me not realise, but confirms for me that was the best decision I made in my life to that point, and that was definitely what I was meant to do. But also just knowing that I was surrounded by that caliber of people all the time, and sharing that hardship with them. And it's like anything, you know, if you eat, sleep, and walk and talk and work with the same individuals, you're going to see commonalities between you, and you're going to become fast friends soon enough, even if you came from different walks of life. And that speaks to the human condition across the board. You know, no matter what you do, what your pastime is, you know, you go and work overseas in the Middle East, guys, you can't speak your language. Next thing you know, you're worried about you're speaking about your families, and you're sending in emails after the fact, going, hey, and you realise that we're not too far dissimilar. But going back to the Rio, like, I could class every single thing we did was a challenge, but also a welcome challenge, and a good time to build really good, fast relationships with our other guys. And as far as courses go, like we went down the medic stream, I went down the freefaller stream. Freefall is one of those courses that the Army, you know, you could pick the thing that you most enjoy in civilian street, that you love more than anything, and if the Army made it a course, they would make you hate it. You know, they make the funnest stuff. They just ruin the funnest thing. They just wreck it. But that's one thing they couldn't do for the freefall course. Like, the freefall course is, no matter what angle you look at it, it's just fun the whole time. And fair enough, it's work, but it was like all you're doing is jumping out of planes. Sometimes you have lots of gear attached to you, but you're under canopy and you're crew. It might be at night, you might not see the ground or whatever, but at the same time, it's still just every single jump was, I couldn't wait for the next one. Awesome. So, and once again, you're dealing with the other guys that you've been to that point, because Joe and I's Rio was shortened because we got deployed to go to Iraq. And so we had to come back from Iraq, from overseas, and actually finish off our Rio. So the CQB course that we actually did with the Rio cycle that came in whilst we were on the next selection after our selection. So all those guys that went to the one squadron to go to Iraq, we had to come back and do that, and then that gave us a chance to build relationships with the guys in the next Rio. So it was for me, I counted myself lucky as having exposures to both Rio cycles, and there's some pretty famous, well-known identities in that second Rio, especially. Just where do I start in terms of experiences? Like I remember this, we're all freezing. And I dare say it'd be the same for you. We're trying to share the heat of this one little meager fire made out of sticks, made out of little twigs, because you can't make too big a fire because you can finish it away. So we're all just fighting for space around this thing, and we're literally just cuddling each other and you know, all over each other, just full body contact, just to try and get some warmth out of this little measly little fire, which was really just for morale, not for warmth, because it's like holding a water between 10 guys, 10 big guys. No one's getting any benefit from it, but at least it's not watching TV. You can watch that.
Yeah, that's it.
That was hard, but it was also funny. You know, it was just a laugh a minute. And you look back, and it's even funny when you look back at it.
Yeah, 100%, man.
That's interesting, because when Joe and I were talking in his podcast, he was talking about some of the funny stories that he came across when you guys were deployed, and there was the one of the I got your back, bro. the famous incident where there was an operator protecting somebody's back as he was doing his number twos. So I'm wondering, whether it's
Was that your patrol, bro? Were you?
Was
in
that you?
No.
No, you won't admit that. No,
No,
was
no,
it?
he's not. No.
It was one of the other patrols.
It was one of the other patrols. So.
We were very close.
So, do you have any moments like that you can think, whether it's operational or whether it's during selection, that you?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I don't know whether Joe's told this story, but we were very lucky. Because we get sick of Australian ration packs because you spend most of your military career when you're on deployment eating Australian ration packs. So when we were deployed, most times we get the MREs from the US, and they'd have these. You get all manner of things in them, which are pretty cool. But you get these Oreos in them, and the Oreo biscuits. And so a certain person used to steal all the Oreo biscuits and actually hoard all the Oreos to the point where we used to call him Oreo Joe.
Must be another Joe. Must be another. I intentionally didn't share that memory.
Excellent. I'm just writing that down, Nick. Oreo Joe.
That's right. I'm going to edit that part out. As you know, if you've seen ours, we don't do any editing. So actually,
that's right.
We'll leave that in there. But yeah, so I intentionally didn't share that story with Brian because then I'll never hear the end of it.
No.
Yes, man.
Anytime.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Thanks, Nick. Thank you. And I also, might as well come out full disclaimer now. Here's my confession now. I also really enjoyed the pound cake and those things.
Yeah, nice.
So the brownie pound cake stuff, the poppy seed. Oh man, yeah. Anyway, bringing back memories now. It was a nice breakup from the Australian ration pack. Yeah, thanks for that, Nick. Yes.
When we were deployed, but a lot of time, because Joe was in a different troop to me, so we spent the first part of that deployment in separate locations. So our experiences were slightly different until we joined up as a squadron a bit later on. But we did spend, prior to that, we were deployed together in East Timor as commandos, and we spent at least the first 3 months in the same patrol. I was actually Zoppo, so we were working together as a scout pair for the patrol. And you spend your time looking at other guys and seeing what you can take from them, what you can learn from us. Learned a whole bunch from Joe, just standing behind him, watching. To me, he was a really strong presence at the front of the patrol. Like, you have a lot of confidence that there's not too much going to get by him. And then if you take the cues off his body language for how you should posture yourself or where you should stand or what you should be doing. And it's guys like Joe, it could be because of his the group experience he had prior to that and the courses and training he'd had. But you're surrounded by a lot of people like that. But I was very fortunate very much to be in that presence, to see how guys at that level moved and walked and talked and operated. And I learned a lot from that Timor experience. Was very grounding for me in terms of it wasn't a high tempo by any stretch, but it was not. And I was grateful for that part, that I get exposure to these guys before we actually go over the boom or whatever it is that we did on our first deployment together. And that was very much the embryonic operator for me in terms of me developing. Effectively started on standing behind Joe in a small team patrol, recon sniper patrol. To me, this was this is absolutely preparation for patrol course. This is how this guy's done a patrol course, so I'm just going to follow my cues off this guy. Wow. And then we got split up halfway through. But I was also benefited from the experience of having ex-SAS, another scout, big, tall, shrewd man, and a good man too. Good man. And learning off him how to operate and how things are done. And it was different, but also equally as professional and confident. So that's there's heaps of funny times, but there's also those times where you just go, wow, this is I'm very lucky to be doing this, especially for what I really want to do is going to help set me up.
I could imagine that. Yeah, I could imagine Joe at the front, and I mean he does this still now. and you feel that presence about people and stuff. But I can imagine just again, it's something I didn't think about having not been in that environment, but just reading the cues of others and just be able to learn from, oh, okay, we got here, there was this, this is how he reacted, so what am I seeing? And having those intimate cues, I guess that could only build further trust, because now you go, if Joe's moving this certain way, I've got to be able to work with that. So I'm trusting Joe. So especially if you're running point, I can imagine how much trust that must build up between you two.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what it's all about at the end of the day. You got to rely on each other, and you got to make yourself worthy of trust as well. So you got to work on your personal skills and prove that you're worthy of it at the same time. But that's what we drive off. That's what drives us as to operate at that level. Is having this this deep-seated trust in the people around you, and you have to be worthy of it as well. You have to work to make yourself worthy of the trust of these your cohort of these guys who are such a high caliber soldier. But I think I learned more than I gave, for at least for that first 3 months. I learned more of Joan out of patrolling, even after 4 years in the army prior to that point. That was very educational.
Man, very kind words, brother. I appreciate that. It's definitely, just to echo your words around that trust aspect. Yeah, it's such a comforting feeling for me anyway, knowing that that you and I were the scout pair, and that I had you right beside me or slightly back as we needed to, and chopping and changing as we needed to flow. But yeah, a heck of a lot of confidence it instilled, and you absolutely earned everybody's trust and respect within our team, from what I saw anyway. And the other gentleman that you're talking about, the tall man, awesome guy, eh? Great man. Can we mention his nickname, you reckon?
I don't know.
I'm going to
I know he's known in multiple countries under that nickname.
Oh, is he? Okay. Well, maybe we won't. But he knows who he is.
I'm sure he wouldn't mind either way that we didn't use it. But he's still serving, he's still contributing. So, I mean, all power to him too.
Absolutely. He's an awesome man, a great man. But yeah, awesome points and comments. And thanks very much, Nick, for those kind words. That's awesome, bro.
Absolutely.
Wanted to tie into, and just on that, you absolutely shared, there's a lot of stuff there which I could go into, but and I'll probably talk about it as we towards later on in this interview or conversation with you. But I wanted to ask you, because there's a couple of things for me coming from New Zealand to Australia, and particularly on that cycle. In the New Zealand cycle, we still had to click our heels together during the cycle and double everywhere. You weren't allowed to walk, you couldn't march. You certainly weren't calling any of the staff by their nickname, like TG or anything like that, or by their first name. So that really caught me off guard. Did you, because you had already gone through and been part of an SF community in the Commandos, was it like that pretty much instantly? Did that catch you off guard? Were you surprised that we were able to call the staff, these sergeants, like by their nicknames, by their first names on the cycle?
No, I think once again, I think I was spoilt going through the Commandos first. If you look at the way basically the genesis of the Commandos at that point in time, the majority of the Carter staff had been guys from the regiment posted out to the greatest SF community. So they were already spread throughout the first Commando regiment, and they became the embryonic Carter staff for the 4 Commando, or now 4 AR, now 2 Commando. And so that precedent had already been set with calling the staff by their first name and not worrying about saying sir to the boss and all that sort of stuff. And
gotcha.
I just thought that was part of the course. I just thought that was the way it had always run and would always run. So that was my expectation. But I'm obviously prepared to call whoever you want sir and salute whoever you wanted to. But at the same time, we didn't have to do that. Yeah,
no, that's cool. I'm glad, because I sort of took my cues off people like you and others, because I thought it was a test. Because NZ, you still had to double everywhere, and you had to get your heels together, and everybody was called staff. There was no, I wasn't calling anybody by their nickname. I certainly couldn't walk anywhere. So if there were guys like you and that around, and if we were marching somewhere, I was like, okay, well, I'll march with the group. Like, if I'm getting binned, like surely they're all going to get binned too. Or they're calling, even when staff would tell me to call me by their, like TG is one of the guys, great guy, sergeant at the time on our cycle, that would, don't worry about that, like TG. And I still didn't trust him. I thought, he's just trying to set me up because I'm from New Zealand.
He has tried to set me up a couple times. But yeah, he likes to have a little bit of laugh. But yeah, I'll tell you that after this.
Yeah, that'd be good. So it took me a little while to adapt to that, but no, that's cool. Thanks for sharing that. That was one of the things that I think for me, I found really interesting and warm about the culture. So you sort of talked about this with your whole approach and what you felt we were getting selected for, to be able to adapt and work with people, build relationships with people, and you've been able to take that into your work now and what you do and what you will continue to do going forward. I was a lot more cagey and protective because I didn't know where I had come from based on the knowledge that I had at the time. You weren't allowed to do that. And so for me to see and experience that, one of the things that stuck out to me about the Australian Regiment was that it was quite warm, like receptive, welcoming when I got there. Did you find that? It sounds like maybe there was, so maybe I'm treading over ground that you've already covered. But for me, from my take, coming from New Zealand and that environment to then Australia, all I had, because all we've done is just pass selection, right? We've just put up a hand and said, hey, yeah, we're suitable for further training, which was great, but there's no guarantee for us. So my whole wiring in my head was, I need to run everywhere, I need to call everybody's staff, I need to do everything with a sense of urgency, which we still did. But there was this warmth and that about it, and a welcoming that I found. Did you feel, was that similar for you in terms of how you felt, or was it because of the commando experience and the being already part of a Special Forces unit that it was just, it sounds like it was just sort of naturally an organic part for you? Would that be right?
Yeah, it was for me. I think, but there's two facets to that. I think it's by design as well. I think that because if you look at the way, especially now looking back on it, there's a lot of conversation just before I got out of the unit about the adult learning environment, and about ways that human beings retain information that's been imparted upon them, how they retain it, and then how they replicate it under duress. Right. And they found that a lot of it's about allowing greater bandwidth for more information to get in, and then gradually increasing the stress for them to replicate those skills under duress to a progressive process. So it's very much an adult learning environment where you treat everyone like a peer until they demonstrate they're not worthy of it. But if they pass the selection course, then at least you give them the benefit of the doubt. Nice. And then to that point, the goal is to get, because they spend a lot of money on us, they spend a lot of money on those boys going through. It's in the country's best interest that every dollar spent is on individuals who take the majority of what we're trying to teach him on board, so he can do it in the worst possible situation. So if you look at it that way, okay, we've tested that these guys can drag their knuckles for 3 weeks, and we know that they're tough. We know that they can take a beating, and now we want them to learn. And there'll be times when they cross the line, so that's when we get smashed, and that's when we got smashed. Yeah. But up to that point, we're treated like professionals. And when you're in that environment, you're amongst your peers, that's where you learn and retain far more information than if you're under this threat of doing something wrong and getting smashed for it. So that has evolved, and so it should have, and to the point where, I mean, I haven't worked in the unit for a little while now, but I know that they're better operators than I was at the same stages where I was at that point. Because of that, largely because it's that we're treating this like an Ivy League school. Yeah, so that's awesome, man. That's the product we want. That's how we'll treat them.
That's great insight. That's awesome, and it makes sense. It really resonates, and I love that point that you took about by design. So that's some great amount of information, man, because it's certainly, from my experience in NZ anyway at that time, and I don't know if they do that now, but that's just a great insight and perspective that I think your words, your knowledge, your experience is going to help, whether they do that now, whether they take that on, or whether they've already been doing it, great. Or whether they haven't been, if it's still working for them, that's great as well. But I think there's absolutely opportunities to learn and grab the bits, like you mentioned, we were grabbing bits from each other that we could take and apply and use. Great insight, man.
Because they're already smart people. They've already passed the aptitude. We know that they can do great things if they give them the tools and the knowledge. So I'm speaking the first. It's from my experience. This is when I was working there, but I know it hasn't changed. So the guys that are working there now, it's actually changed. Yes, it's actually changed forever. It's gotten better. The way they run the whole continuation now for the Rio, the end product, they're good to go straight away. Straight away, awesome. They're already like they've been in the unit 4 years and they've been working doing the job, because that's the way that the training package has been designed. And so it should. You're talking about 0.01% of the world's military population operating in a very niche environment with very, very specialist requirements in the nation's interests. So there should be that amount of rigour put behind it. If there wasn't, we might as well be a battalion. Nothing about against being a battalion, but horses for courses. You know what I mean?
100%.
That's that actually raises a thought in my head. Is like, you're going through the selection and training and all the science. Again, we're going back to science, right? All the science that's building up to make better operators, but I guess ultimately better people. Yeah, that's where we're trying to head to, and to leverage those power that we all have innately in our minds to become better. It's just whether we're able to apply it at the appropriate context. But I just wanted to go on a slight tangent, if that's okay, and just cross training with other SF forces around the world. Did you get to encounter that? And I'm just wondering what would be your experiences with training with other SF forces?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very lucky to have had experience with Southeast Asian nations as well as some of the Five Eyes armies. And I tell you, like, I was guilty of this myself. I underestimated the capabilities or the toughness of some of the countries that we work with, because they didn't have the technological advantage that we had, nor the education that we had. But if you look at them man to man, fair enough, the training system might not be as advanced as was, and they don't have the budgets that we had. And this is the Southeast Asian countries that we're working with. But to a man, they probably had a harder life than the average Australian has had. So by the time they get into those units and they work in those conditions, they're hard as nails. They're tough. They're wily. They're smart. They're very, very capable. You give them the right tools and spend the money on them, they'll be just as good as any other operator. The only difference will be the cultural issue. It's cultural differences from the way they think to the way a Five Eyes nation would think. So, but the interoperability is still there. You just have to make a slight tweak. But then there are others where some countries in the Middle East where we have worked with the soldiers, and once again capable, but the drive and the impetus to improve their soldiery skills might not be there, whilst they might have the budget. In other cases, it's a case they don't have the budget, they don't have the background, the education, they don't have any of this, and they're also working for a country that they don't believe in. So their capability is a reflection of that. So, but by and large, in fact, 100%, if I was to talk about the Five Eyes nations, completely interoperable, guys of the same ilk, same caliber, same capacities, just wearing a different flag on their flag patch. That's it.
Wow, fascinating. So it's I guess a follow-up question, but slightly a little bit more tangent. I hear through the grapevine, Nick, that Arnold Schwarzenegger was your hero, and that yeah. So
what grapevine are you tuning into? Wow, your in must be unbelievable.
Good question, great question, Brian.
Good. So let me continue. Yes, I'll carry on. So in the movie Commando, right, there's a line, Nick, and it says, "Sally, you know I said I was going to kill you last." Yep. So what? Finish that off, Nick.
My lord.
I told you he'd get it.
I'm guessing.
That's brilliant. So great movie. So I have this sort of my head now of Nick going up. All right, we need to go on patrol now.
That's exactly, you're spot on, mate. That's exactly how I go out patrol.
That's it.
Even to this day.
Yeah.
So when we would go to get ready, we had nothing there because Nick had all of our weapons.
Yeah.
Oh, Nick had all the weapons.
He had everything. All more strapped in.
So even the rocket launcher, which you just
Even the
run off
rocket
the bit,
launcher.
yeah, just run off the.
It wasn't even an issue.
Brilliant.
Path, that movie, literally, if I
Yeah.
was to count back, that's the movie that set me on the path. And
Yeah.
and I was only a kid, obviously. So when Top Gun came out, for a moment there, I wanted to become a Top Gun as well. But the one that stood true was Arnold Schwarzenegger, and that kicked it off. But then every subsequent movie, book, whatever it is that came across my table, that's the thing that piqued my interest the most.
Awesome.
And yeah, absolutely. And I even bought Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding. And that was my template for training for selection. I soon realised that
Wow.
it wasn't, but it was. Got my head around progressive overload, specific adaptation to opposed demands, a lot of the principles that he talks about in the books. And all I needed to do was apply the principles, but to a different way of training. But I still wish I had biceps like him. I won't show you my arm. but my arms. You might have heard that on the grapevine as well. But at least I understand the principles to train.
Yeah.
Oh,
Awesome.
beautiful.
Because we'll go into that when we talk about some of the stuff with the mill and that as well. What you guys have been doing. Great questions, Brian.
Right.
Hey, I'm going to jump in here with. Have you? Because I was supposed to ask this earlier, but I'm glad that I wrote it down. Have any females gone through selection, Nick, that you guys have helped and that you're aware of?
Not while I was there. There was actually a couple. There's been about one on every Rio, at least on every Carter course.
Right.
Per year, about one. Maybe some of none, but there's been more and more females going through combat arms units.
Yep.
And then attempting selection.
Selection.
Yeah, that's one of our goals as a business is to get the first female all the way through.
I was going to ask.
We've got a couple of candidates which we're working through with at the moment.
Awesome.
And it's not going to be easy.
Yeah.
Because you know how hard it is, and we're I was 90 kilos. I was big as I still run fast. I could still lift heavy, and even that was hard. And you deal with gear that's a 60 kilo pack is still a 60 kilo pack. So we've got to get these chicks nice and real strong, and get them a lot of endurance. And it doesn't mean it can't be done, because you see this right now. This new precedent's been said about how fit females can be. You just have to look at the CrossFit community, for instance. 100%. And when you look at that industry, you look at that community, you realise, okay, it's not very far away now. We've got to find a person who is that level, who's willing to do that job. Yep. And then that'll be the first female to get through.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I mentioned that because I would be keen, and we'll be posting up the links and stuff anyway. But any of the ladies out there that are wanting to do that, I think, the place for them to go to or reach out to will be yourself at the Mill Gym there in Perth. So that'll be fantastic. Great to hear that you're working with a couple as well, man. So that's exciting, but also for me anyway, as a male, maybe just because I'm a male, also daunting because I think, as I think about that, I'd love, any female that wants to do that job, and if they can show that they can do that, awesome, more power to them. But the male side of me can't help but feel more sort of protective of, if that makes sense, of the ladies that go in there. Mind you, if the lady gets in there, would probably be protecting me. But but you know what I mean? Yeah.
Actually, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's within our nature as well. But that's a like a paradigm shift in terms of the psyche, our psyche, which we need to make an adjustment to.
True.
Because they are capable. I mean, my wife's CrossFitting. You met Lisa, you know this, and she's CrossFitting. She's a beast. You look at how capable they are, and the crew she trains with, Helen and Lisa, and that crew. You realise, okay, it's just a matter of time if the right person wants to have a crack at this, and they'll be just as capable. We've been lucky enough to work with females at work at the unit. Yeah. Some of them shoot better than we do. Some of them shoot better than we ever will. And they've got something to bring to the table, and they also do this. They give us this capability, which is which shifts us outside of that I guess that view or that perspective or perception of what
they are capable of. That typical view. Yeah.
And it adds a whole new capability to the continuum that's we really can't ignore. So the units, the SOCOM is very forward thinking in that respect, but the standards are set by war. The standards are set by combat. GPMG still weighs what a GPMG weighs, so
Yeah.
everyone's got to be expected to carry it.
100%.
But going back to what I first said, mate, this chick's, my wife does more pull-ups than me.
Yeah.
So it's a matter. If she wants to do more, she wants to lift a heavy, she wants to lift GPMG more than I will, then she'll be a candidate as well.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's just a matter of time.
Mm.
Exciting, actually. I think it's really exciting.
Yeah, that is exciting, 100%. I love that you guys are involved in that and got your finger on the pulse and got a live feed to all of that stuff as well. So that's awesome, mate. I'm gonna jump in and go to, and Brian, you can jump in with any questions that you got on cycle if you wanted to. But I want to move to that's a nice move into the transition and your transition. And so it would be cool, Nick, if you could speak about this, because one thing that I noticed, probably more so about yourself, because of the friendship that I was lucky enough to form with you, although I didn't really delve into it because I didn't understand it. So you obviously, from my perspective, did a lot of stuff in terms of property investing and setting yourself up. You were very forward thinking and planning and strategic about the stuff that you wanted to do, at least from somebody like me looking in, particularly when we're at 4RER and the recon platoon and stuff together. And I guess, how did your transition first come about? What was your decision for leaving the unit? What was it 2008 or 2009?
Yeah, 2008 I got out. When we get back from, my original plan was to have a family and be a dad and be a husband. So that was the end state for me. And I believe that becoming an operator gave me a better chance of being better at that. Awesome. I just saw that the characteristics and traits that I wanted to represent as a dad, in terms of being a leader and a stoic example of how to take on the world, would be best shaped by joining the military. Besides, I thought it was cool to join the military, but that was the end state for me. So I said I'd do 10 years. I wanted to do 10 years in Special Forces, and I was very lucky to achieve that. And part of that is I wanted to become, so I did join the unit to become a patrol commander.
Yeah.
But after we came back from Iraq, and at that stage I also knew, okay, 10 years, I wanted to enable myself to still give myself the freedom of choice to do whatever I wanted to do when I left the military. And the only way I saw that happen is if I had a financial backing of some description. So that's why property came up on the radar for me.
Gotcha.
To start looking into property investment, and I was very fortunate. Obviously, before I went to recon snipers, I was in a bloody strike platoon, or whatever the platoons call themselves, but in a platoon, really good platoon, 7 platoon. And two of my mates there heard me talking about property, and I said, "Oh yeah, I'm interested in it as well." So Jamie and Troy joined me we started a company. We started buying property in '99. And throughout that whole process, we just buying houses and selling houses and that sort of thing. Whilst we were away in Timor, whilst we did our things, I was in recon snipers by that stage, and so was Jamie, and Troy was still in the one of the companies.
Yep.
And then I thought, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm just basically going to get a financial backing of houses behind us, so by the time I left, I wouldn't have to rush anything. When we got back from Iraq. In 2003, we went on team, and we were on team for a year. So I was a sniper at that point in time, and also a breacher and a couple other things as well.
Yep.
But I actually found that I was getting tighter and tighter. I was a pretty bad sleeper, but I also valued. I was so far into property investing that when I knocked off from work, I'd go home and research properties.
Yeah.
Where's the next thing we're going to purchase? What do I need to do to get finance for it, and all that sort of stuff. So I was effectively working 2 jobs. I look back at it now, I was putting a lot of hours to make that happen. I was just committed to that life after the army as I was to being committed to the army. And you can only do that for so long. So about 3/4 of the way through our time on team, I was hanging off the side of the building with my patrol, and we were waiting for the go, and I was just getting tighter and tighter, and I was losing concentration, and I was starting to zone out. We're hanging off the side of the building, the rope, I had the charge, and I missed the count. I just fell asleep. I literally fell asleep on the rope. I missed the count. The guys on the other walls, on the other sides of the building, they hit their charges, and those charges woke me up. I woke up, put the charge on the wrong window, and everyone's looking at me going, "What's going on?" literally hanging off the side of the building, having these confused looks around me. I said, mate, I've got to call it. So I called it, and as soon as I called it, up to that point, I didn't realise how tired I was. And when I called it, this whole fatigue just dumped itself on me. So basically, every part of every aspect of every chromosome of my body, I just felt this deep-seated level of fatigue. I spent the next 6 months in bed. So I spent 23 hours a day sleeping and 1 hour a day on the couch, because that's my exercise for the day, and that's how my wife fed me. So my wife, and my girlfriend at the time, but she's my wife now, she basically looked after me hand and foot. And I was losing conditioning. I was missing out on the boys doing their thing. They did a rotation in Afghanistan after that. I missed out on that. I was just driving myself into the ground, thinking I'm no longer capable, because I identified myself as being that person. And I still had in my head, I'm going to go back. I'm going to get back to the squadron, And after about, it was just over 13 months, I was out, 6 months in bed, remaining out time, just trying to get back up to scratch. And part of me said that I would never get back to scratch, but I did go back to work. And I did work, but I was nowhere near the level that I was at. That you were at. And guys noticed it. Guys knew it straight away. And I just basically struggled through the next three or 4 years trying to get through. So I also knew that the writing was on the wall. Like there's nothing out there. There's no information out there. It wasn't even diagnosed as a real thing, chronic fatigue. Yeah. And a lot of the advice I'd gotten back at that stage was, you just need to go to sleep, have a little sleep. I said, mate, I've been sleeping for 6 months. I still don't feel like I can get out of bed, literally, let alone talk to people. Yeah. So I basically lived in a hole for, at least 9 of those 13 months, but definitely 6 of those months I was in bed. Yeah. And I never got back to scratch, even after, obviously at OC, we know OC. OC looked after me really well. Like he said, whatever you need, mate, you just take whatever you need, and you just, you try everything. We'll back you. You can have a little time off you want. And that gave me courage, because a guy like that says that to me. It means that, okay, maybe he recognises that I'm still worthy. Okay, I'm going to try and get back to scratch. So I did come back, and I did do a couple of deployments. Luckily, they were low tempo deployments. But they also realised that, and I realised after talking to the staff, that I really could only do bodyguarding jobs. So I did a lot of the PSD stuff, and that kept me sane effectively, and it kept me deployed, kept me going to all over the place and working with other people from other units, other countries, other parts of the ADF. Yeah. So that kept me in the game. But I also knew that if I was to do selection again, there's no chance I'd pass it, because I just could not get back to fitness. Yeah. But I also knew that I started to have a bit of a nest egg. So by the time I left, I knew that I was going to leave about 2006, so I started my transition 2 years prior to actually getting out. And that was effectively 10 years from when I passed Commando selection. So I ticked the box in terms of 10 years in the regiment, or 10 years in SF, which I'd said I would do. Yeah. But I also knew that I wouldn't reach the PC, I wouldn't become a PC. My last 2 patrols were as a 2IC, so I was grateful for that position. And one of my patrol commanders, we both know him. He only just got out, Harry. He's still one of my best mates, and he was very much a mentor for me through that process. Yeah, and still is to this day, really. And he's done really well in his own civilian life as a psychologist, so a very successful psychologist. 100%. But I think I was a lab rat for him too at the same time, a little bit of practice with this dude. But it was a quick pro quo, effectively. So, but that whole process was, I saw the writing on the wall. I saw that I couldn't contribute at the level that I was accustomed to, but I saw myself as being able to. Yep. And I knew that that chance of hanging off a wall and falling asleep again and zoning out was still a real threat. So I said, okay, it's time to call it. So I called it, took a fair bit of time off before I called it, used up some more leave, and I was still planning to go back to Queensland and get back into surfing and still do the property thing. So become a builder. That was my main thing, because I knew that I could set my own. I knew I couldn't work for anyone. I just knew I literally couldn't work for anyone. I couldn't do 8-hour days, couldn't do 40-hour weeks by any stretch. I still was suffering from migraines. Migraines came on pretty much as soon as I called it quits. I was getting these massive migraines, throwing up and all that sort of stuff, because it's a pain I'd never experienced before. Yep. But they last for days, and you just go, okay, I can't work for anyone like that, because I'll be unreliable in terms of having to call sick days, and they'll start thinking I'm taking a piss and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So I thought, okay, I got to work for myself. And so I started started transitioning, started doing some things around getting a builder's ticket. And then Joe hit me up about following in the steps of Jim Jones or Mark Twight, starting Jim. This sounds pretty interesting. Was on the radar.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad that you came to me, because what it said to me at the time was that I still valued amongst the guys I respected most, even though I couldn't contribute at that level, I still could contribute at some level. And I was buying properties with two of my commando mates, so that they kept me sane as well. But knowing that I was still counted as worthy was oh mate, you had me at hello, you know, that sort of thing. I'm in straight away. So so it was I wouldn't be so dramatic as to say it was a life saver, but it was very much a big point in my life to be involved with Joe and the gym.
Man, that's an incredible story. And that's, you know, a lot of that stuff on the peripheral, I didn't really know all that detail. And those things, man, as I discovered those, because I saw a couple of podcasts with yourself and that on there, watched them on full watch and really enjoyed it, but also took a lot away from that personally. Even stuff that my wife has shared, I've had a habit of, and I showed it not only in NZ, maybe not so much in NZ because I was told one thing, but then the goalpost changed, so I sacked it and said, well, I'm going to Australia. But then I did a similar thing there. It's like, well, I was trying to be forced into doing something that I didn't want to do. I just wanted to stay as the operator. I didn't have those aspirations of PC or rank and that sort of stuff. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I just wanted to be a trooper and just keep talking. So, but then when I got backed into a corner, I moved away. And then what I didn't do in our situation, which I was really, you know, as I looked at those podcasts I looked on, really made me internally reflect on not only your words, but also what my wife has shared with me. I was like, man, I felt really bad about that stuff. And so, you know, really, really sorry about what I did and just leaving. So I left you and guys that were still serving in the unit in that situation with regards to the gym and said, yeah, listen, I'm not, and I didn't take the time to talk about it because it was never one of my strong points, I don't think, and it's still not. It's something that I'm trying to learn through now, but I really appreciated you speaking about those things because it just opened my mind up to get out of my own bubble that I've been in, you know, just because otherwise I probably would have still been wired the same. So in appreciation and a thanks to you sharing that stuff, and you talked about this at the start off camera before I hit record, about the importance and need to share this information and these types of things. And yeah, they're not things that I'm proud of, but I'm absolutely, one of the things that I'll forever be grateful for is the fact that I've got you as a friend, always had you as a close friend. You've always had my back with regards to when we were working together, and even when we weren't, like with the gym and we were doing that in business, but my naivety and immaturity at the time didn't allow me to see the bigger picture, nor did it allow me to understand where you were coming from and the challenges that you were going through. So I got nothing but love and respect for you, bro, with everything that you've done, what you've gone through, what you've continued to focus on and build and galvanize the team of people that you have supporting the business partners, your beautiful wife Lucy and your children. One child or two?
One child, yeah.
One child.
One child and a horse.
One child. Awesome.
And a pony.
And a pony.
Yeah.
And a pony.
Well, all of that stuff, mate, and so much more to come. This isn't that we're not wrapping this up, but I just wanted to. It was nice to be able to acknowledge you at this time and to apologize for that hole that I left you guys in. And I didn't realize till only recently how deep that was. But the resilience that you've shown, that you've garnered from all the experiences that you've had, is a real testament to the sort of man that you are and those qualities that you embrace of being a special forces operator and how that transfers into life today. So massive respect for you, bro, and I do apologize for what happened, but grateful that you've accepted and come on this podcast.
Oh mate, wouldn't be anywhere else right now. But yeah, no, I appreciate that, Joe. Thank you. Like at the end of the day, our heart for what we did, for what we aspired to do in the service, in whatever way you look at it, that our heart is in the right place. But the other thing is we're all flawed. At the end of the day, we've all got our strengths and weaknesses, and to hold those flaws against us would be for 10 years now is ridiculous. Is a ridiculous thought. But I know guys who still hold grudges after all this time. But we can't evolve. It's just not a sign of us learning the lessons that life gives us. And I knew your heart. I knew the sort of person you were. I also know that we like there are times when I was going through what I was going, where I did not come off as the nicest guy, or I did not come off as a selfless guy, because we all go through things in our life, whether we're sick or not, or whether we've got issues with family, or because I know a lot of the guys, especially working in a position where I was 2IC for a while, if there's any issues with the guys, they're all good guys, usually because there's something going on outside of this space here that we can't see right now. And if we take the time to investigate what that thing is, then we'll get to the root of it, because we can't write the guy off as being poor of character or anything like that, because in our environment, they were selected for the character. And they have good mates, they build a brotherhood because of those traits and characteristics. So we've got to give them the benefit of the doubt to look and say, okay, what else is going on here? We've got to give this guy the time and space to either sort it out or help him sort it out. And sometimes it might take 2 minutes, sometimes it might take 10 years. And that's the thing too, when you're looking back at this, like I never spoke about our bust up. I never spoke about to anyone, no one. Only people I spoke to about was the guys who were going to come on as business partners because they needed to know my perspective on it. But outside of that, no one else deserved to know, because what happens in that environment is people start to, they get a little bit of information, but then they let their own bias fill in the rest of the gaps for them. And it becomes something that it is not, and it's not real. So they might be assessing you as something that is not you, but they let their own bias play into it, whether they had a grudge against you or not, or didn't know you or knew you really well. They're going to put that lens over the top of it. So that doesn't need to come into this space, because Chinese whispers gets around. Next thing you know, you said this about me and all this sort of stuff, and that just makes this whole thing more complicated. So I didn't speak to anyone about you or me, other than those people who were going to actually invest their money into this, and they already knew you anyway. So it's like, okay, well, you got to put my perspective, because if we're going to lay all the cards out on the table and you're actually going to give me money that could have gone to putting food on your table for your family, I've got to give you my perspective and make it as objective as I can. But also, there was a lot of emotion in that. There was huge emotion in that. It's quite a defining time, I think, and the hardest thing, but also the best thing. Being sick and going through all that sort of stuff, all at the same time. You know, you see the true character of a lot of people, especially those you deemed as your friends, and you realise that those people who and when we got to, so this is years later, we got together, we met at a restaurant halfway between where we were at that stage, and we hugged it out. We literally hugged it out. You know, we said, you know, mate, I'm sorry. You said you're sorry. I said I'm sorry. We had a little bit of a chat and a lunch and that, and then that was it. It was as far as I was concerned, I was there before we even got to the table. I was there not long after you left. Like I would never, if you had said you wanted to come back, it would have been up to my other partners as to whether you would have come back, because I would have said yes, you know. But that could be a fault, could be a plus. I don't know, but that's the way I am at that stage. But I think the key thing out of that is not talking about you or that to anyone else after that, because I know how our environment works. It's hypercritical. You know, people you know how it is. You'd be talking to two operators and you talk about one person. One operator say, I love that dude. He could, if I died, I want to look after my kids. And the other guy goes, I hate that dude. There's no way I'd even go, I wouldn't even speak to him. It's just hype. It's either one way or it's completely the other way. And that's the way it is for a lot of guys there. And it's good. It's part of the game. That's part of the thing that makes them that drives them hard. They see things in black and white. This is the right way. This is the way we're doing it. But at the same time, we need to apply some variances in the way we conduct ourselves and the way we see things differently to different situations. And this is one of those situations where I've always got to give someone the benefit of the doubt.
That's awesome,
Wow.
man. Great,
You know, that is, and sorry to interject on that, because I think from what I just heard, there was a summary of leadership. That's what I heard.
Absolutely.
Because and this, one of the things that annoys me in the civilian world, corporate world, is that we throw somebody, they get a manager title, or they get a lead title, and all of a sudden they're expected to understand how to lead, how to manage things, all right, and then it's total opposite. You know, the way you described it. You know, I've had situations where people around me have gone off and they started to be bullying. They get into bullying, or they find ways to undermine a position without actually understanding it. And you've described the exact opposite of that. And at the end of the day, it's about how we connect with people and so forth. So I'm just a little bit curious from your experience, Nick. Now you've been out of the regiment for a little while, and you're working in your gym. You're working, I guess, that corporate environment. You're working with your investment portfolio. Have you found like the leadership space, the principles that you hold true in your military world still apply succinctly in the civilian world?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's the military world set me up for the civilian world, without a doubt. Like I mean, Jim. So Jim effectively Joe established the gym, and Joe said that we wanted a selection process to get in. It made sense to us, so we were all in. But so from the military perspective, it made so much sense because we're going to surround ourselves with people who we can actually get on with. And when I look back on that, and I was best man. I'm best man at some of our members' weddings. That's how good this community is. You know, our first two members are still members of the gym today, and this is 13 years later.
Wow.
And Joe knows those guys. So you look at that and you go, okay, we've got something cool here, and it's because we set a bar for entry. So that's the civilian side of it. But if you look at that commercially, that is terrible.
It just reinforces the comment I made earlier. I told you I wasn't smart.
But there was method to the madness because it came back and it proved it was actually having that bar it speaks to certain people. Initially, it didn't. So if I just rewind a little bit, to knock back 90% of the people, knocking back 90% of your clientele is a recipe for disaster, especially for a small business in Australia where 75% of small businesses fail within the first 3 years. So we were very much going to be one of those statistics. But one thing we did see is that there were people who actually understood what we were trying to say. There were people out there who actually understood that these guys didn't think they were too cool for school. They didn't think they were elitists or anything like that. They just had a metric which said that life is not a participation medal. Life is either you succeed or you fail, and you keep going until you succeed. So we set up an environment in our community where to succeed, this is the metric, this is the standard. After that, there's a whole list of rules which you need to align with, which if you're a good person, there's going to be no impingement on the way you do your thing, the way you live your life. But if you need adjustment, then you're going to find this environment very hard. So what it said was that there are people out there who actually got that, and all we needed was 100. We just needed 100 people who could make it to the gym on a regular basis to pay fees that spoke enough to that they'd come and pay those fees and do it. And we're lucky that there was well and truly 100 people who got that and said, this is where I want to park my money and this is where I want to train. But it took a long time to get there. Look, it took a lot of heartache to get to that point because we were only still getting our heads around the internet. And now, our first two members, I don't even know how our first members found out where we were. You can ask him today. You can ask Ryan. Hey, Ryan, how'd you hear about us? I don't know. It's actually probably on the grapevine. I don't know. I don't know. And Darren's the same thing. He goes, actually, someone told me that you guys are open or something. So he just rocked up. We were actually setting up the gym when he rocked up. I'm putting stuff up. Okay, mate, are you all right? Do you need any help? You're here to train. All right, sweet. I better train. But that's how it started. And you look at that and you go, well, there's enough people out there who get this. And so that made it worthy. That made the heartache worthy. And it was hard because I was dealing with fatigue, big time back then, especially. And our very much our charter was to train with our members. So we were spending a lot of time training. And when we have very few members, like 2 members, it's very easy to do that. But when you've got members coming in all day, every day, you can't do that. 8 hours a day of training, you just can't do it. But to the best that we could, had to walk the walk. And if we said that we were going to do something, we better do it to the hilt, and we better do it with absolute extreme prejudice. Otherwise, we'll be seen as less than we put out there, less than we project. And that perception is critical for building community because people have to have something to believe in. that is true, that is a cardinal point for them to measure whatever it is they deem as important, and you've got to represent it. So the mill was, like I said before, wasn't quite a lifesaver, but it was a lifesaver because it kept saying, if I couldn't live that life in the military, at least I could try and emulate that life outside the military. And as part of that was it attracted people to the point where people would come to me and say, "Oh, Nick, you guys, what are you doing? Do you need any help with anything?" And that's how we met our next two business partners. They were basically, one of them was a builder, and he'd sold his building business and said, "Oh, mate, you need anything? I've got nothing to do right now. Do you need help?" And that's how we started the exploration company, because I said, "Oh, look, we want to get out of security. We spent a lot of time travelling and we don't want to travel that much. We got out of the army because we didn't want to travel so much." He said, "Have you thought about geological exploration?" And I said, "No, tell me more." And he said, "You've got to speak over to that member over there." So we went to speak to that member. That's Pete. Pete's in the office next door. And he's the MD of our exploration company. He just sold out of his exploration company and started a new one with us. And that's how that side of it. But that's the way that started, is because we set up a community built on trust. You know, we wouldn't have these people coming to us if they didn't think we were worthy of their trust and their time. These guys are already established guys. They're already wealthy guys. They've already been there and done it. So for us, it's a massive learning curve to just to hang with them and to spend time with them, be graced with their presence effectively. And it's been really good for us. You see something scribbled on the board. It doesn't make sense to me, so I hope it doesn't make sense to you, but that's all geological explorations. But but where I can contribute, even though I'm not a geologist, and yes, I can lift heavy things, and yes, I can teach people to train and try and set their mind for how to do selection. But I can also I'm effectively managing our people. That's our job. We've got 30 staff, and my job as director for our staff is to make sure that they're trained. They deploy all over Australia at this point in time, so some very remote areas, to make sure they're trained and safe, and they're managing their risk. And then they come back and they're debriefed and all this sort of stuff. That's my job and it's not a full-time job, because I'd rather lift weight. So I'm lifting weight, you know. I'm moving, shifting heavy things, or what I think are heavy things, till my wife walks in. And then after that, then I just put on a come walk in the come sit in the office and do what needs to be done here. But it's about managing people as best I can, try to help get doing and where the company's going, and trying to make sure they have absolutely everything they need to do it, so the organisation is not stopping them from being what they can be effectively.
Oh, awesome. I like that, because I mean, just in my travels, is seeing across different organisations, the biggest stumbling block is the organisation. They put process and barriers in place, and they expect people to be able to lead because they're on a one-day course or something, and and then all of a sudden they throw them with people, and they flounder. And while some people can work with that, some people aren't able to. What you've alluded to, or actually more than alluded to, you've said throughout, it's connections and the trust all the way through, and supporting people. It's like you put people first and support and trust, and then they can get the job done.
It's that simple, but it's also hard. Simple. Everyone's got different expectations, and I mean, a part of it is the language. You got to align what trust is, what it actually means, because even trust has different definitions to different people. If we can set what that means and how it represents in the way we walk, talk, and treat each other, then people will recognise it when they're getting it. Oh, this worthy person is worthy of trust. Yeah. And a lot of that's built around your capability, professional capability and capacity and your ability to do your job well. But it helps to be a good person. It helps to be able to get on with people.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. Such good information, bro. I've taken so much from your words and what you've shared in here, just in that segment alone, or that piece alone. I guess it probably ties in with, I've probably just got a couple more questions from my side for you, Nick. And really, it's more, if you wouldn't mind taking an opportunity to just talk a bit about your businesses and what it is that you guys do and how people can connect with you, what those, if that's all right.
Yeah, okay. Well,
take the name of the business and what it does, and then also, and where, what people can expect from you and your company, and so that we can sort of direct traffic and stuff there as best we can.
Thank you guys. I appreciate that. I guess so my main thing is well, I'm actually 50-50. My heart, my soul is in surfing and shooting. That stuff. As being a director, you get a certain amount of flexibility, but it's still a lot of responsibility goes with that. So that takes priority. But I think that we've got two businesses. One is the geological exploration business, which is called OmniGeoX, 2 words, OmniGeoX, and geological exploration effectively is a shortened term for it, GeoX.
Gotcha.
And those geox.com, omnigeox.com is and we've been around since 2011. So we started the business in 2011. And when we started, we spent a lot of time because we did a fair bit of work in Madagascar and Indonesia, Philippines. I spent a few years in Myanmar, setting up some exploration projects over there.
Yep.
And really, effectively, all we do is we get a lease, a mining lease, whether it be in Australia or overseas, and we secure the mining lease, then there's a minimum amount that needs to be spent on that in order to retain the mining lease. And when they say spend, it means sending out geologists out there to get geological data on it, because people think that all Australia has been explored, but it hasn't really been explored. There's so much Australia hasn't been explored, so the government appreciates data sets coming back.
Yeah.
But based on the data, it might be commercial. So if it's commercial, then you can potentially sell it on. It's like buying a house and renovating it. The renovation part is actually building the data sets on the block of land.
Yeah.
So we could renovate the house and sell it to someone else, or we can renovate it, knock it over and build a skyscraper on it. So the analogy is to an asset which is worth holding on to, we'll list it. So if it's worthy, we'll list that company. And so that's the other part of what we do. We take mining assets, gold, copper, and nickel effectively, and we list them on the stock exchange.
Awesome.
And that's kept us, that's another part of our business which has been exceedingly successful.
Yep.
And so our exploration arm, we do a lot of consulting for small to medium tier mining companies. Our geologists that we have on staff here work contracting consulting for these small tier medium mining companies, because they always need, all the mining companies in the world, they always need to explore. They can't stop exploring, whether there's a recession or a boom or whatever. They've got to keep exploring, because they need to have the next 20 years worth of projects on their books in order to maintain their license to operate. So exploration companies, especially consulting companies like us, will never not have work. We've never stopped having work, because there's a lot of small tier ASX listed as well as other countries listed geologists to work, but they can't hold on to those geologists full time, so they contract our guys on. So that's the other aspect of our exploration business. And the consulting part of it is where we started, and the listing, the ASX companies part of it is what we started subsequent to that. And that's effectively us. That's our trajectory. That's what we've been doing since 2011, and that's what we'll continue to do. We've got COVID. COVID last year was a crazy time. For most people, it was a crazy time. For us, it was a very interesting time. Because what it also reiterated once again that no one can stop exploring. Like the mining industry, Australia, especially in WA, is one of those things which has priority for us as a company. We were very, very lucky to do well out of that whole period.
That's awesome. So it didn't affect you guys. You were able to keep operating as per normal, pretty much.
No, this time last year we had 14 staff. So
right.
30 effectively doubled. Yeah, because of the whole period of uncertainty. And our ability to be, ready to go, to be, that can-do attitude, and also making sure we managed our risk in terms of, well, if it does go south, how do we manage our risk? And we've been through a couple of cycles now, mining cycles anyway. We still continue to grow. So that's been an eye-opening for me in terms of not only business but also big business, the way organisations work in terms of raising capital, in terms of listing, in terms of raising capital once you're listed, all that sort of stuff as well. It's been a crazy experience for a little old trooper from Queensland. but I'm still continuing to learn. I'm very fortunate to still retain a position as director. I actually resigned as director in 2015 to focus on the gym, because I had enough. I just wanted to lift heavy weights and surf and shoot.
Good priorities.
But then when we went to 30 people, it got to the point where I needed to come back to help out effectively and contribute, because there's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of moving parts, and the company's still growing. So I came back on as a non-exec this year, and I've been working with our crew to develop them. and
Awesome.
to make them more capable and safer out on site. And it's effectively, because we've got a process now, and the process is, you can effectively match it to an RTO, which is the next phase of this process. So now our clients are recognising this and engaging us for further training stuff. So I've been doing a lot of training stuff for clients as well in the exploration space, and mainly around managing risk, so field operations, so camping effectively, or going out bush on patrol. That's so, but that experience too, I'll leverage that experience. I'll tell some more stories from back then. And one thing I've noticed working in the mining industry, or working in the exploration industry more specifically, is they're pretty hardy crew, because they in green fields. Like, there's no one else out there. They're just picking up rock samples or picking up dirt samples, and no one's around for 600 to 800 k's. They've got a sat phone, and that's it. So they're a pretty hardy, experienced crew, but they still love war stories. Yeah. So they're starting to nod off, because some of the stuff you're telling is pretty mundane. Just throw in a war story. Drop one in there. They're awake, and next thing you got them back, so you can start then continue on with what you're supposed to teach them. Yeah. I tell the commando story now.
Yeah, the commando story.
But yeah, if whatever we can do to get buy-in effectively and to keep them safe, and then that's what we do. So awesome. I'm once again being able to pull on those experiences and that time has been paying itself off, and hopefully it's going to pay off when my daughter gets to 13. She has her first boyfriend as well. I'll be threatening enough to be able to draw on those stories and that's the next challenge. But at the moment, everything's pretty good. Touch with it.
Oh man, that's awesome. So that's with Omni GeoX and the Mill Gym. Those are the two core businesses for you at the moment, bro?
Yeah. So we're doing security stuff, but we wanted to get out of it. So the exploration piece, once exploration found its own feet and was a good, strong, viable business, we shut down the security piece.
Awesome.
And I'm glad we did it. I've got a much better lifestyle now. I still deal with fatigue. That's just a thing for me. But if I had to work, I don't think I would be here without the help of my wife, but also my business partners, and also the great staff we've got. And you look at our staff, our trainers, we've got the same trainers for the last 7 years in an industry where the turnover is super high for trainers. Yeah, these guys are the most through. Even if they qualify as a doctor, they come back and help out on camps. They're super busy guys. We've got 2 doctors on staff now, and one guy we've worked with in the regiment, he decided that after 16 years in the unit, he'd go to med school. Wow. He never classed himself as a book nerd like me, never like Joe does, never classed himself as a book nerd, but he smashed those books. Like he became a doctor in a big way, and he's now practicing. But he also comes back and helps in our camps. Like, he's so understated, so professional, so knowledgeable, and he believes in what we do, and he's like my brother as well. We will help each other out with each other's kids, that sort of thing, as we go along. Yeah. And our staff's the same. We just had one of our staff, which you know as well, Joe, who passed selection last year. He's been with us for 10 years. I was so proud, and I also knew that that was in the back of his mind. He was thinking about doing it for so long. He finally had the courage to have a crack at it, and he had a crack pass first time. He's a good individual, good human being, such a good bloke, and he'll do wonders for the regiment. So I'm pretty proud of him. And one of the other guys who passed TRG selection as well. So these guys always got somewhere to go, always pushing for something, but they always come back and help us out. So I'm very fortunate to have those people.
That's awesome, man. And what a great acknowledgement of those people, not only your beautiful wife and your daughter that you have. Good luck, those 13-year-old boys that want to come knocking. I wish you luck. Just be warned, he doesn't just have toy guns at home, so just be
He's not just toy guns anymore.
But man, that's so cool and really great to hear. So happy and pleased for you, your family, everybody that's part of the group that you've helped to create, bro. It's fantastic to hear. I guess you've touched on so much. What's next? What's next on the horizon for you, apart from just wanting to do surfing and shooting and that sort of thing? Are there plans for you next in terms of, obviously things are still growing in that exploration space as well, but what's next for Nick? And before, in case I forget, can you talk about the camps that you run as well? What the names of them are, what and a summary of what those are, so that people can hear a bit more about those camps and that as well. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, those camps were born of that what we said to ourselves in terms of making sure the next line of Australians or next line of operators are better than we were. And if we could go back 20 years and say, what would we have liked to have had as we were trying to develop to achieve those goals? Can we provide that now? And a big part of that is mentorship. So being able to say from someone who's been there and done it, this is what's helped us. And after looking after and training a number of others, this is what's helped them as well, and try to get them into that space. But it's like what I said before about the X Factor. You just don't know how hard people are willing to push themselves. One, because in most cases, people have never even touched the sides of their limits, never even know the fullest extent of their capabilities and capacities until they're really pushed that way. And a lot of things in Australian society don't allow for that. They don't allow for kids to be pushed. They don't allow for adults to be pushed. And we're also very comfortable to the point where there's no hardship, physical hardship in our life, other than those that we see subjectively from our perspective. But if we were to go to another community on the other side of the world in the middle of the mountains and it's sub-0 degrees temperature, the air is really thin and every day is survival, then you realise what hardship is. So we can't put them on a plane and send them over there and make them live with their family or whatever. So the camps were designed to actually try and simulate that situation where the first day of selection, that shock of realising you have no control over what's going to happen next. All you have control over is the way you think and the conversations you have with yourself and the way you interpret your environment. That's what you have control over. So we have to give them a situation where we can put them in that position straight away. And so the Carter camp was the first camp we ran, which is basically the Carter course, but abbreviated significantly from 3 weeks to 36 hours. But 36 hours is as hard as we can make it.
Yep.
In terms of, well, yeah, we've done our risk assessments. We understand that there is a risk associated with driving people this hard for this long with this little sleep and this little food.
Yep.
But we've got it down to the point where we've done 2 every year for the last 10 years or something.
Awesome.
And we've had people flying over from all over the world to do it. So we've got a good demographic, good understanding of who our audience is and what the capacities are. And for those people who don't train with us who fly in, we don't know how fit they are.
Yeah.
But we know how much a person can take in 36 hours. There's enough study out there, but there's also including selection, helping out on selection and experience selection all the way back to that period.
Yep.
And so the goal is to simulate as realistically as we can to best position those candidates when they come onto selection, so they don't have to suffer from the overwhelm of having that culture imposed on them, like immediately with absolutely no relent or no easing off at all.
Yeah, gotcha.
So it's our job. It's our job as instructors, and there's ex and current serving SAS instructors on it. And what we do is we basically make it as hard as we can on those people, because the harder we make it, the easier or the more acclimatised they are to it when they see it for real. So it's in our best interests and their best interests to make this as hard as we can make it. And some people used to say, oh, because it's a civilian course for civilians, you'll make them have tea breaks and have a sleep and whatever it is. No, we don't, actually. No. In fact, if we did that, they would not come back. We have people redoing the Carter camp over and over because we give them feedback at the end of the 36 hours. We sit down with them, all the staff, all the senior staff, and the candidate that sit on the other side of this boardroom table here, and we give them an hour and we speak to them. We talk about their whole progress throughout the whole thing. They get tested across a number of different domains throughout the 36 hours, including a buddy rating, a Kim's game, and all those sorts of things, aptitude testing, reflex testing, all that sort of stuff. And we give them feedback based on not only the cohort of the camp that they were doing it with, but also the cohort of all the camps that done it with us. We keep all that data.
Yeah.
So they get a real-time understanding of where they sit in the mix, and they also get understanding where they sit against the benchmark of those who've done this camp and passed selection. So you can't get better than that in terms of where you sit in that mix. So they get a realistic understanding where they are on that continuum. They've got no chance to whether I think you're a really good candidate with a bit more training, I think you'll pass or you'll get picked up. And we can say that now with a fair amount of certainty.
That's awesome.
In fact, we've been 100% certain, 100% so far.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's really because the Carter camp, so that's Carter camp. All the camps are
Yep.
36 hours. Next camp is the Chaos camp, which is navigation. So that's
Gotcha.
where a lot of people fall apart. We teach them how to land navigate. We take them up to where selection is likely to be held, and we go through and do that in that terrain.
Yeah.
But we don't do it. We do it day and night, so they have to walk at night, but they get to walk white light at night when they're navigating.
Yep.
And it certainly adds a layer of difficulty to it. And the checkpoints don't stand out, so the checkpoints are only little stakes in the ground with little bits of ribbon on them. So they actually have to make sure they're right on the money when they get there. Otherwise, they'll be looking around for a needle in a haystack.
Yeah.
And we get the feedback back from them saying, "Oh, that was harder than selection," or "That was harder than Happy Wanderer," or if I can find a stick in the middle of a low-hanging bush in Lancelin, I can find a checkpoint of a guy standing under a tarp with a water jerry waiting for me to come in and do push-ups or whatever. So,
That's right.
so if we make it harder than we can, hard as possible in that 36 hours, we're doing our job, and that's that. So it's tough love, I guess. Tough love is the way to describe it. Is that we're imposing as much hardship on them as we possibly can, doing it safely.
Yep.
And also being able to read the person because they're different levels of fitness.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, that's enough of a dose for you. Sit down for a bit longer, or you'll have a shorter leg to do, or have a cup of tea, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then the last camp we do is the urban survival camp, where it's
Urban survival.
Yeah, so it's the Havoc camp. It's Havoc. So it's Chaos, Carter, Chaos, and Havoc.
Gotcha.
And Havoc is urban survival, where if you, as an operator, and you go on your Rio cycle, you do continuation courses, which are very much in the space of knowing how to move and operate in a built-up urban area.
Yep.
And it's a cool course. It's the funnest course we do. It's intense, but it's still cool. Like, it's still fun. They're all fun to degrees, but this one more so. And we teach them how to be an operator. We teach them how we would run a holding area, how we would shape up for a job, how we would prepare for a job, how we would set everything out, how we would rehearse, how we would take in information, and how we process the information without giving too much away. It's very, 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 very high level stuff. Yeah. Because you can only cover so much in 36 hours anyway, and throw so much content into it. But it becomes fun where it culminates in a hostage rescue at the end, where one of our staff gets selected to become the hostage. and
have you been
like a suspect until he's positively ID'd, which is part of it.
Gotcha.
And so everyone enjoys it, everyone has gets something out of it. But the main thing for those guys and girls who think this is the job, we want to sell this job, saying this is the sort of stuff you get to do. But you get to do it with real guns, and you get to do it with real information and real threat and in a real situation, and it's still fun. It's still fun, but obviously it's serious work. You got to be careful what you wish for when you're doing that sort of stuff. But at the same time, if this speaks to you, then that job will definitely speak to you. It definitely will fit the bill.
Awesome, man. All right. Those sound awesome. That's brilliant to hear. We're going to make sure that we have the links and stuff, all that sort of thing in the description. But I'm just making sure I got this information right. omnigeox.com.
Yep.
That's for your exploration stuff. We've obviously got the mill gym, and we've got those 3 camps that we just spoke about: the Carter camp, Camp Chaos, and Camp Havoc.
Yep.
And the mimicking the selection is the Carter one. The Camp Chaos or Chaos camp is the more navigation focused, and we got the Camp Havoc, which is the urban survival, the fun, cool stuff. They're all fun and cool, but it sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. In New Zealand, I think, do you guys have gel blasters in New Zealand?
Have what? Sorry.
Gel blasters. They look like real guns, but they fire out little balls of gel.
Oh, if they do, bro, I don't know. I haven't. I think I've seen the. Are they the ones on your guys' videos? I've seen the video.
No, well, they were made illegal in WA, so that's why we're using Nerf guns.
Nerf guns.
But they're Nerf guns on steroids. We had to beef up the springs in them, so they punch out some heat.
I'm not surprised you have gone and tinkered with those and beefed them up. Not surprised at all.
Wait, hang on.
Carry 10 Nerf guns at a time.
Brian, did you have any questions that you wanted to ask Nick while I got you?
No, I've got nothing further that I can think of. I just think it's just been insightful. I was really just thinking about the theme that I get, or the thread all the way through, is culture, and culture eats strategy. We've heard that from a lot of different places, but understanding the culture, then understanding the game, the rules, the processes that you go through, and it can all help build up to coherently bring things together. But you know what? The other thing that really got me, and you said this, is that community built on trust. But what does trust mean? And what does that look like? Because in my space, we bandy this around because I work with corporates and teams and so forth, and we talk about, well, we've got to build small teams and it's built on trust. But I'm thinking, well, what does that look like? And
Yeah, it's
most people
hard to
can't answer it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, part of it is the empathy factor. You really exercise empathy in any situation across cultural barriers, across gender barriers, whatever it is. The ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes is part of that. And it's a skill that you never. I'm still trying to develop myself. You're still trying to learn it. But if you understand that part, then trust comes because we're built to trust. I mean, we trusted our parents as we grew up. We had no other frame of reference. That was just trust. But that trust is actually a big part of love. We don't have love without trust. So we've got to be that person that put ourselves in someone else's shoes and say, okay, what's that person thinking based on how the world is around it, or how I represent myself, or the perception I'm giving, and that'll give me an insight into what, building the trust. Not trying to be manipulative or even trying to influence, just being you. And a good example is going back to Joe. Working in patrol with Joe, like I'd only just joined, so I come from the infantry and then joining the commandos and then working in a raiding platoon and then going to a recon platoon. There's a different way of operating between those three different areas. And so I go into a patrol with a New Zealand group guy, Joe, and then our first patrol, I just saw this guy sitting there, and it was just his presence where it was an outward focus on what's going on around his patrol to keep his patrol safe, to do his job. And you also had this feeling that if anything kicked off, he's the guy that you have to stand behind. Do not stand in front of him. Yeah. So knowing that, it builds in this level of that. Okay, this guy is authentic. This guy is walking the walk. This guy is not only talking the talk when he does talk, because he wasn't much, but his actions speak more than anything. And you see that when that having that presence is really reassuring when you're on your own with four other guys in the middle of nowhere, and you're just relying on each other. And so if you be that person that's worthy of trust and you're authentic, trust will come. Trust will present itself. But you have to be that person, not only in public but at home, because then that's the authentic part about it. And it's not an act just for people to see. So it's hard to define what it is, but it's relatively easy to understand how we build it. But that's the hardest part, is actually, that's where the rubber hits the road. That's where all the effort goes into this, is that you have to be that person when people are not watching, when people are not looking, because sooner or later people will see it for what it is if it's false, and then you won't have any chance to build that trust. So that's where it's at. You've got to represent. You've got to be that thing. So you're going to do something. That's what you got to do. You can pivot. You can change your mind, because we just learn as we go. We might learn that's not the right way to go. But if you hold true to it and you say, look, I think this is why I changed my mind, and you're just open about it, just honest about it, that's good enough. But you just got to do what you said you would do, and that's the easiest way to build it. And it's hard. It's hard to do.
Beautiful.
But that's where the rubber hits the road.
Yeah.
Awesome, man.
Yep.
Thanks very much for that, Nick. Bro, this has been awesome. I've got a whole bunch I've actually got pages of notes and stuff here from the things that you've shared, which is awesome. So I think, from my side, if I can take some time here just to wrap this up with you, on behalf of both Brian and I, absolute privilege and honor to have you on the podcast. Thank you for being on here. Thank you for sharing the insights that you've shared. There's so much here to unpack around understanding processes, creating better people, humbling yourself, and being able to be worthy of that trust and respect of your teammates and those around you. allowing greater bandwidth to absorb that information. And I loved how you spoke about those processes and culture along this journey. And as we've been speaking, integrity and doing what you say you're going to do. You're somebody, you're a man who's lived by that ever since I've known you, and it's evident in the things that you've been able to do and create with the wonderful people that you have surrounding you and supporting you, and the way that you support them. Just an incredible story with regards to overcoming chronic fatigue, those 6 months in bed, 23 hours a day, having the support of your lovely wife, more than 9 months of that in the 13th month, and the fact that you're so open about that, I think will be really helpful for a lot of people that struggle in a lot of other different spaces, because we didn't get into, but I'm sure there'd be many other aspects of mental health issues and challenges as well, which you've overcome and continue to work through and help support other people in. Planning ahead, I love that aspect about what I've known and recognized in you, and seen how you've gone about planning things and looking at the bigger picture. You definitely have that strategic view in mind of how can or what is the next step, or what if this happens, which is a great sign of a leader. Not only a manager, you speak about managing people and setting them up, but your leadership comes through in everything that you've done to date, and just is reinforced by the privilege that we've had of having you on this podcast. Huge one, benefit of the doubt, man. That really warms my heart to hear you speak about that, and those things that you've spoken about, giving people the benefit of the doubt. I think, these things, that's the reason why I've got so many notes scribbled down. They're really going to resonate with people, Nick, not just in Australia, but here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and anywhere around the world. We will be putting this out, and hopefully people will take the time to listen. Building a community, people that you can trust, that can-do attitude, the mill brand and stuff itself, and how it's been built on trust, your aspects and approach to managing and leading people, the setting up the next generation is what I've gotten from the themes that you've spoken about. You're a person that's looking ahead, looking to pay it forward, looking to how can we improve and create the better generation or better version of ourselves, so that they're more capable, more experienced, more knowledgeable, all those sorts of things. And I love what rings through for me is your desire to want to leave the Sandy Bearer and Wing Dagger in a better position than when you had the privilege, or when we had the privilege to hold it and wear it operationally, or currently, and that sort of thing. So beautiful time with you, my friend. It's so good to see you looking well and looking sharp, and that you're able to lift heavy things, and able to still get out shooting and able to get out and enjoy the surfing. But brother, I just want to mention I love you very much and your family. Grateful for you and the things that you've shared in here, and our time together serving side by side, having those privileges and opportunities to serve at your side and to learn from you equally in the same way. So great to have you on here, bro, and thank you for your time on this podcast.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Same to you. I really appreciate the time too. Really good to connect, even if it's what's the time difference? 5 hours difference.
5 hours, yeah. 5 hours
mate,
difference.
I'm glad. I'm absolutely stoked that we could get together, regardless of whatever medium we use. Yeah. I really appreciate the time. Really appreciate your time as well, Brian. And thanks for the opportunity to speak as well. You guys, what you guys are doing, it should be absolutely more of it, because the best thing we do is pay it forward, and you guys are opening up the channels for us to, whatever way we can, get as much information as you can. And whilst it might not be me, I might not be the person that speaks to everyone, but the more people you get on, they'll take a little bit from everyone. So really appreciate what you guys are doing too, not just the chance to correct you again, brother. I really loved it. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Bro, you're welcome. And as always, we close this off with who dares wins.
Who dares wins, mate.